All right, take three. So we're having a few connection problems today, which again is a shame because this is one of the rare times that I'm actually able to get um, I was able to get home on time. So what I'm noticing right now is that Twitch is giving me a couple of warnings about my bit rate. Now, when I take a look at the stats on OBS, that is not what I'm seeing. But it has also sometimes been a kind of an early warning that something's going to come up. So I'm just going to take a second here and play around with a couple settings. The other thing I'm going to do, so I'm still seeing a little bit of like a negative sign from Twitch. The thing that worries me about the unstable connection warning is that it does sometimes mean I lose my quality options, and I know that's not great. Hey, Lord Gloom, good to see you. I'm sorry, sorry for the rocky start. I know this is the third. Oh, you started Book of Hours. Wonderful. You have questions. All right. Well, I will hopefully have some answers for you. And Zarog, good to see you as well. So it looks like things are balanced out a little bit. Again, I'm sorry for the rocky start here. All right. I see a nice green line. Looking encouraging. So one last check here. Okay, I think I can be cautiously optimistic about the broadcast. So yes, starting later than I wanted, but earlier than I normally start. So I don't know if that's something to be proud of or not. It's my friend's birthday today, so I think they actually wound up buying or pre-ordering an early copy of, or a copy of Civilization 7 so they could play it just before release. I actually spent some quality time with that over the weekend. I have actually had a very good time with it. I think, so the one complaint that I do have some sympathy for with it is I do think the game has some interface problems. I don't believe Alexander is actually in number 7. I'm trying to remember. But yeah, so I think most reviews that I've seen, I usually just kind of see the little capsule of the review. And sorry, I realize this is the second time I've talked about Civilization at the start of the stream, but I figure I'll get that out of the way because there's a lot to get into Book of Hours once we're in the session. So I think the capsules that I've seen of the reviews have correctly identified that this is probably a pretty, or will be a pretty polarizing entry in the Civilization series. My hot take on it is actually that I think this is one of the closest this is probably one of the closest entries to Sid Meier's vision of Civilization that we've had since probably the first one. Well, I mean, it would be that would be the one that he designed. So, but what I mean by this is that, and you can hear this in the Designer Notes podcast with Jake Solomon. So Soren Johnson, who designed on Civilization 4, is talking with Jake Solomon of XCOM and Marvel Midnight Suns fame. And his view on that he expressed was the view that he expressed was that if you want to kind of know what a modern Sid Meier Civilization would look like, you just need to take a look at Civ Revolution. which would be those are in fact designed by Sid Meier. And in fact, if you look at a lot of the things that Sid Meier actually does design, like Ace Patrol or Starships or such, they are considerably simpler games. And of course, what a lot of the Civ games in sort of the numbered entries, even though they're ones that he sort of oversees, they've all had different designers. The exception for this being this time around, where Ed Beach was... Hello, Hisley. Yeah, well, I'm doing my best, but glad to see you're here. I will jump into the game, hopefully before too long. But yeah, so first of all, it's quite interesting that Ed Beach, I think probably it's circumstance that causes that as much as anything. So, Brian Reynolds was the one who had done Civilization 2, and then of course the spiritual successor. I think there were some disputes over the title, or the ownership of the title, Sid Meier's Alpha Centauri. But Reynolds left to found, I think it was Big Huge Games. It was the one that did Rise of Nations. And I've always gotten the impression that that was something of a contentious split, although I don't know if it's between Reynolds and Meier, or rather just the fact that so much of the studio left in the middle of a Civilization project. But it also seems to be the case that everybody involved with that has largely just not talked about what caused that shift. I believe Reynolds and Meier have both been interviewed on Designer Notes. And I also know that it's not really addressed in Sid Meier's memoir. It's mentioned as an event, but it doesn't say anything about sort of the details behind it. So, from a historical point of view, I am quite curious, but I think it's quite decent of the participants not to sort of air the dirty laundry. But in any case, so I think Brian Reynolds probably would have been the closest to two entries afterwards. But I think Soren Johnson sort of said after Civ 4, the question is sort of, you've done a Civ, like, where do you go from that, right? John Schaefer, I know, left. And unfortunately, I know he worked at Paradox for a little bit, and then he had been working on At the Gates, which didn't really seem to land. I know there was some trouble with the development, which is a shame, because it did sound like he had some trouble over the course of making it. But essentially, the only, people have left before they work on another one. So I don't know if it's choice. I don't know if it's circumstance. In this case here, we do at least get to see two Civs back to back from the same individual. But this one, it could not be more different from any of the others. I think it's one of the more radical changes between the installments, and so inevitably that is going to be controversial. And this is, of course, above and beyond the usual reaction. Every time that a Civ game comes out, people just talk about how the old one was so much better and how they've ruined the series. That happened with Civ 6. I think it happened with 5, but I don't really remember the launch of 5. I think it had some DLC before I wound up playing it. But one way or another, this kind of seems to be what happens. And then, of course, time goes by, and inevitably people, the new entry becomes the pinnacle of the series that the new entry is killing, right? This always is seems to be what happens. But the backlash definitely seems to be above and beyond just that standard cycle. And I will say the one criticism that I do sort of have some sympathy for is the user interface. So in general, I feel that the game does not do a very good job. In terms of the Civilopedia, I think it's the weakest Civilopedia that I've seen in the series, which is quite sad for me because it's one of the things that I'm actually most fond of. I really do think that I can sort of connect some of my interest in history and just generally learning things from some of the earlier Civilopedias. And I don't want to pretend that it was some, Encyclopedia Britannica that was just waiting for me to check out, right? It was something that it was part of a game, but I definitely feel that the series, the Civilopedia has not really flourished in the most recent releases. But the only thing I'll say is that combined with the interface, I feel that the game could do a better job of communicating what's expected of the player. I don't think they've done a good job of sort of onboarding the player. But once you get past that, it's actually quite a bit of a simpler game, but not necessarily in a bad way. It's simpler in the sense that they've gotten rid of a lot of the things that I think people maybe have taken for granted, but don't necessarily need to be there. And I had quite a bit of fun playing it over the weekend. So I have no idea whether or not any of you would particularly enjoy it, but I don't know. It's something that I spent the weekend on. One of your gripes with Book of Hours player onboarding. See, I actually like the way that they put you in on this one. However, I did play Cultist Simulator, so I did have a bit of a head start. But on that note, Lord Gloom, yeah, so this is the thing. And this is actually a point that I want to highlight in terms of the difference between Civilization and how I talk to people about Book of Hours. One of the things to me about Book of Hours is that there's going to be a point where, like, you're going to get lost at some point. And the question is, where does that feeling of lost happen? Because one of the things that the game can do is it can always just sort of, drop the hint in front of you. But what you just wind up doing is you wind up delaying that point when you feel like something's insurmountable. And to me, it's also why I don't do things like look up guides or things, because in the end, I just wind up training myself to have other people play the game for me. And of course, it invites the question as to how those people have got it all figured out. So whether or not it works, for those of you who are curious about Book of Hours, you start on St. Brendan's Cove, and the process of actually getting to Hush House, opening up the quarters and the front door, is sort of the tutorial. And it's particularly interesting because you never know what the challenge is going to be. So in general, what happens in the start is you sort of, and the weather's like this actually, but you start off on St. Brendan's Cove, and you've got, your talk and consider verb, and you've got a journal, and you start making your way up into the village, and you sort of start learning what these verbs, and you start learning what the different cards do. And over that course, you start gaining a better idea about what the various elements do. But the final challenge is not actually to get someone to open a room for you. The final challenge is to use the Hush House key to open the front door. And the funny thing about it is that people didn't realize how close you can zoom in. And if you think of it, that's not the sort of thing that you'd normally think about in the context of, okay, I need to introduce this suspicious fisherman, and you need to convince the suspicious fisherman to help you out, and so on and so forth. A lot of those interactions are a lot like what you would expect in Cultist Simulator, and they're the sort of thing that you rely on a lot in this game. But the whole idea of, I didn't realize I could zoom this far into the room, and because I didn't realize I could zoom this far into the room, I didn't realize that I'd get this key to open the front door. This was a source of trouble, so much so actually that it's in the news, and it's in the one of the tips for starting the game. And it's always just kind of fun. It's one of these things where you can think that you've got all the bases covered, and then the world shows you where the gap was, what the assumption was that caused things to go awry. But anyways, Lord Gloom, I don't know if you wanted to just crash into your questions or not. I'm happy to answer them, or I'm happy to let them come up as the gameplay goes by. But I will do my best to try and answer without getting defensive about the game that I like so much. But I'm happy to try and answer anything that comes up. So for reference, you've crossed the bridge, successfully opened the door, and you have the first 2 rooms unlocked. Okay. So I have a note here that says invite the incident guests. Well, we'll do that when the thing comes up. Oh yeah, well, I mean, I'm assuming you wouldn't be asking questions to get more out of the game if you didn't like it, Lord Gloom. All right, I'm going to send off some invitations for the sound. So this one's a bit of an unusual one. The Affair of the Other Horizons seems to be limited to people with an interest in Rose, which tells me there are 3 guests. So we'll see whether or not it works. Stamp, envelope, send. And then I'm also going to make a little bit of money at the Sweet Bones. But while we do this, I want to prep for the... Oh yes, actually I also want to bring in... Mr. Kill for conversations. We'll lose him for the better part of the day because we're going to be answering the questions for the various guests, but I figure I'll get the memories that I can. Okay, so we're going to be leveling up resurgences and emergences. So that's Moth and Grail. So suppose one of the first things that I can do here would be to take a drink of water. Oh, okay, yeah. So the Tree of Wisdoms, and then the book challenges and such. Did you want me to do an overview in terms of how the different challenges work, or did you want to sort of say a specific problem that you're running into? I'm happy to do it either way. I'm actually gonna, because we're getting to a fairly high level of challenge here, I'm gonna just take a minute here and write out my the memories that I have access to. So I've got taste for Grail to start off with. Okay, Beguiling Melody. Gossip. So that gets me Grail. Foresight doesn't, Patterns doesn't, Fears, Salt, Satisfaction. So you want to say Tales of Winter or something that needed 6 winter things, you could only find 3. Is there any point trying to do that? It kept saying add some more things in furniture, but ultimately do you need to hit 6 to pass? Yes, you do need to match the challenge of the book. If you can just give me a second here, I'm going to... Okay, so I'm going to leave it at Satisfaction for now. So let's take the Karashim Portalon as an example, because that one also has a 6, although in this case it would be 6 moon. So I think you're probably familiar with the basics of how you would read this. Now, I've read every single book in the house right now, so obviously this isn't like a... It's not the fairest comparison, but... So if I need moon, we could add the Tryst, so that gives me 1 moon. The Lunar Globe would give me 2. And then I would say, so let's say that I was trying to read this right now. I don't have any moon memories, I don't think. I guess we could see that if I mouse over. Technically Sand Stories, but clearly I wouldn't use that. And then, of course, the problem here is my skills are so high that basically any of these I can easily take on. So this would be a situation here. Now, in reality, this isn't too hard to handle, right? So I could say, like, if I had a skill that had 2 moon, and that's not that hard to get. I'm trying to remember which one of these. I think maybe Pearl and Tide. No, Pearl and Tide is Rose. Wolf Stories. So if I had Wolf Stories at level 1, I could put that in here. That would be 4 of 6. And then at that point, I really just need a memory. So something like a Confounding Parable would get me to the 6 there. So arguably, that's not that hard to do. But I think what you're really interested in here is this idea of if I'm just shy, right? So if I'm at a 5, if I'm at a 4, what realistically are my chances? Now, you can't necessarily predict exactly what the challenges are going to be, but when you are short on reading a book, you're always going to get 3 chances to do something extra. And in some cases, it will ask you for comfort. So in that case, you can add a piece of furniture. You can actually add pets to that as well. This is one reason why specifically looking at the aspects of things really helps, because you wouldn't normally think of the cat as furniture, but again, it says comfort, not furniture. So that's one that can come up. But there's also sort of moods that can take you, and these are unpredictable. So there's like Duende, there's Epiphany, and those ones are interesting because they'll actually get you a subset of aspects. So again, you can't control it. Sometimes they're going to be irrelevant to your particular challenge. But what matters is that even if you don't even if it doesn't challenge you to like add another element of the soul or another memory or something like that, you can actually just let it coast. And in some cases, it can actually get to a point where you just get it for free. So the funny thing about it is that it's kind of a yes and no answer for the simple reason that you get 3 trials. It depends specifically on what you get, but obviously there's only so much that those are going to give for you. So if you're close to the total, it makes sense to try and do it. But if, on the other hand, I'm doing something like, I think the Road to Janus would be an example of one of these. So like this is an 18 knock text. So if I'm doing this at the beginning of the game and I've got like a shaft and, preliminal meter and I don't know what else, maybe a pattern memory, maybe if I could somehow produce multiple curious hunches or something like that, like there are very few circumstances in which I'm going to get enough knock to be able to bridge that gap to the 18. Although I guess technically this one is written in VAC, so I'd have to add another 2 to the total because that one has a knock aspect. So in this sense here, those challenges that you're seeing are definitely things that will allow you to go further with your book. But they're not sort of I can read any book if I try enough kind of an answer. There are more and less better opportunities to use that. Yeah, so the chair that you're thinking about, I think, is the Night Sky chair, and that's a moon chair. So that one has 2 moon. I'm trying to remember if there's a painting that gives more than 1. I guess it would be the Velvet. Yeah. So the Velvet. Now the Velvet isn't a comfort. It in fact isn't even a thing anymore. In this case, it's just wall art. But if the game were to ask you to look at some art, the Velvet would give you 2 moon, whereas the chair would give you the 1. I'm going to resume my search for Grail and Moth memories, but I think you had a question about the Tree of Wisdoms as well that I'm happy to answer. All right, so regrets now. Impulses gives me the Moth. Okay, Contradictions doesn't have a Moth or Grail. Confounding Parable, same story. Hindsight, no luck. Bittersweet Certainty, no luck. Earth Signs, no luck. Storms, Intuitions. Yeah, okay. So this is the thing I was a little worried about here. So I've got Taste, Beguiling Melody, Gossip, Satisfaction, Impulses. So I suppose there's Name Day... I guess it'd be Name Day Riddle and... I mean, I guess a Newman, or maybe an Old Moment. Either of those will probably... excuse me. Help me out. Okay. So this is going to be a tougher one than I would normally want, but I know that I have at least the basics down for a to be able to level this up without other interventions. So let's take the... Actually, let's, as much as I'd like to do something other than the Lake Fusino recordings again, I know I'm going to need every memory I can get. Okay, so the other one is mainly, I don't know what it wants you to do. You slotted some things in, but I'm assuming that it works like everything else unlocks. Do you wait until you have the unlock requirements? So it kind of depends, Lord Gloom. So I'm just going to bring it up here. So the first one is always the journal itself, which gets you a tryst. So I guess the thing that I would say is that to unlock... Oh, sorry, I should maybe be clear on this. Technically, nothing's being unlocked in terms of the Tree of Wisdoms, other than what you... I guess the thing that you're unlocking is the potential out of a skill. Hello, Jamie. How you doing tonight? So... Like in this case here, you'll notice that I've got some... Okay, yeah, I see what you're saying here. So, I definitely took a very cautious approach on this one, but that was because I had a goal for myself of having a lesson in the top branch of every single branch here, right? So, you'll see that there are not enough skills for every single slot, and so a few of these I skipped over. The way you know what can be skipped over are the dotted lines over here. So there's two main reasons why you will put something into the Tree of Wisdoms. Either one, you need a particular element of the soul, and so you decide to put it in... because you want to get access to that element of the soul, and it will tell you inside of the... it'll tell you sort of inside of the block. And then the other thing, and I can't really show you exactly how this works, but every single skill that you can put in here, it can go into one of two branches, and it'll give you a readout, right? It'll tell you something about the world, and it's sort of... This is your decision in terms of which part or which side of this skill, or what aspect is more sort of fundamental. And so there can maybe be some character reasons as to why you like one outcome over another one. Now, I basically tell this every single time, but there was one particularly with Edicts Inviolable where I took a look at the two different results, and I did not like the implications of one of the placements for Edicts Inviolable. And I got a really nasty, or not nasty, but I got a cross message on YouTube talking about how I wasted that person's time for quote-unquote flavor text. I'm sort of like, well, flavor text is kind of the game, I guess, if that's... Obviously, flavor text implies maybe a little bit less importance than exists in this game. I don't think it's fair to call any of the writing flavor text in this game. But like, I care about this stuff. I do actually think there is a difference when you put, rhyme and remembrance in Skolakosophy and what that tells you as opposed to the other. So there's a couple of reasons why you might hold back on that. Either one, you want to see what all the options are, which means that you want to have a free slot open to be able to make a judgment. Or alternatively, you want to make sure that you're leaving the slots open so that you can get a reasonable balance of elements of the soul. But the one thing I will say, I know when this game first came out, there were a couple of people who actually reset their playthroughs once they found out that there's actually two different things that are written when it comes to when you slot these in. And I actually don't necessarily think that's quite the way to do it, because I think this game has been built in such a way that you don't necessarily know what the most valuable skill is, or what what that particular bit of writing that, maybe didn't make sense when you first read it, but after you read some books, you decided, I want Edicts Inviolable in preservation rather than Horamakastry. The thing is, for me, like, I can't really think of a lot of situations in life where I've dealt with that kind of uncertainty and I've refrained from making any decisions or taken any action whatsoever. And then everything was clear and I'm like, oh, isn't it so good that I didn't do this thing? It doesn't mean that you go off half-cocked, but in some cases, or worse still, right, the idea that in life you just kind of hit the rewind button and you get to play it right. Very often in the world, there will be these cases where I make a decision, and maybe it wasn't the right one at the time, and what becomes the story, or what, is my effort, is more, how did I get out of maybe this less than ideal situation I found myself in because of a lack of information. And I think that's a slightly more interesting way of playing the game, because of course, again, you're not starting off in the game with like full knowledge of this secret world. You're learning as you go. And instead, what you do is like, okay, now that I know better, I'm going to direct my attention towards certain things. But the thing here is the Tree of Wisdoms, to my view, is really where you're going from the knowledge inside of books and skills that you have towards something that reflects more of a worldview for your character. So I don't believe there's a way to sort of lock yourself out of any interesting paths if you go with the if you like just randomly assign stuff in the Tree of Wisdoms, you're going to potentially wind up overweight in certain elements of the soul versus others. And that will mean in some cases it might be easier to do some things and harder to do others. So you'll notice here that I have a lot of Whist. So I've got a 3+ Whist, which is 4 Lantern, 5 Winter. Whereas my Fet is simply 2... It's a 2 Fet, so it's 3 Moth and 4 Rose. And in fact, my core only has 1. Yeah. So... I wouldn't. So my view is I wouldn't stress about this, but I wouldn't treat it casually either, because it is actually telling you something. And I play at a certain extreme where I don't commit anything to it until I'm forced to, basically. I don't think that's the most rewarding way to play. I just think that's a quirk that I did for this time around. But I think you learn something about the world when you read the... you learn something about the world by committing things. So with that in mind, you probably do want to pay attention to those. And if you feel like you should hold back, you will sometimes be rewarded for doing so. But you're not going to wind up in a situation where you can't beat the game. All right. Yeah, so we've got the Lake Fucine recordings on their way. Let's get that gossip. Yeah, exactly. So I think you have an experience. You're having an experience that is um, perfectly consistent with the first player's experience of Book of Hours. You are not expected to know everything, um, and whether or not you want to reset your playthrough, I suppose I leave up to you. But I've personally never felt you should be. I don't know. I like calling it tiger mothering your. All right, I'm thinking I might have either misplaced or I don't know. It feels a little weird that there's. Oh, you know what? I should have. I should have given this one to. Um, Yvette. I wonder what the. I wonder what the response would have been. Okay, impulses. Oh, I didn't even pay attention to what. All right, satisfaction. That was my bad for not checking. Final question. Say someone were to like drink all their tea. Are those taste memories gone forever? Or use the last of your ink? Okay, yeah. So there's a couple of things that you can do about that. So first of all, you will eventually get these letters from Cater and Hero or TR Unlimited. So so there's a few different ways that you can get tea. Sometimes you find it. But you can actually order things in. As far as inks are concerned, you will actually find some books. If you want, I can give you a more direct answer to this, but I'll actually say that in some of the books that you read, you might be given some indications in terms of where you can get some inks. For the most part, yes. The game will not automatically give you the ink, let's say. In some cases you'll find some inside the rooms, but rather, how do I put this? There will be some cases where it is essential to have ink. There will be others. Should see what the weather brings. So there's some cases where there will be ink that's essential. There are some other cases where you'll find your life easier, but you'll basically sort of turn around and say, okay, I think I've worked my way around this problem here. So I'm going to hoard everything. I use inks very rarely, but inks are actually not a bad way of pushing yourself over the edge regarding certain texts. Yeah, the one lesson that I got, this was true before Book of Hours, but I think one of the things I've learned about gamers is that people don't understand what soft lock means. Um, there was so many encounters on. Oh, that's interesting. So I don't see Daymare showing up. Well, I can always write another one if I have to. Oh, maybe it's because I had him in the had Daymare in the salon recently. But yeah, so like the game gets very confusing, and there are points where I think people are legitimately lost. But I've actually very rarely seen situations where, like, unless you destroy your journal, you actually wind up in a situation where you can't progress. Okay, sorry, I was a little distracted, but I also should say I didn't get a ton of sleep last night, so my attention is sort of all over the map. But I'm not quite sure what the story is going to be with Daymare. I may need to do that again. But while we're waiting, Sand Stories is Rose and Moon. So let's get what we can out of that. And I need 7 for that. Okay, so that's 2. Gossip we are already claiming, so... contradictions were good, though. 3. Well, 5 if I can find one. Yeah, intuitions. I think I'm actually out of moon stuff. So sadly, I'm 1 short, but... in theory, could you run out of money before tipping the rectory guy by hiring people from the inn? Well, so you're always going to have one friend in the city who will work for free. So even if you completely run out... So first of all, you can earn more money. But even if you did that, you would always have someone you could hire as an assistant without money. Actually, Zrog probably was doing more to preserve your experience than me, and maybe I shouldn't have volunteered that as quickly. But yeah, so far as I can tell, unless you destroy the journal, there's always a way forward. Although a little bit like the priest legacy, some paths are a little bit harder than others. Okay, ablations and iron, a 2. Spintria. The postmistress examines the letter and deems it sufficient. It'll go with the next post, she reassures me. Hey! Daymare did show up. The water of the Isle has a very faint, very distinctive taste, sometimes described as apple shroomy. So it did occur to me, if I could have, it actually wouldn't be a bad idea for me to... You know what? I think I am going to make that old moment after all. Because I'm going to lose the satisfaction no matter what. Because that'll allow me to use the rose. So how straight line this tutorial is. Well, so the tutorial really is you getting to Brandkrug, or maybe the start of Hush House. So I think probably you've already completed the tutorial in that sense, Lord Gloom. But obviously it doesn't... like that still gave you a lot of freedom to do whatever you kind of wanted. It's just some things are more interesting than others as far as actions are concerned. I figure I'll just sync up the texts before I go any further. Or I could be missing the question you're asking. Okay. The Humors of a Gentleman, Samuel Savage's satirical comedy on the intrigues of the ailing but cunning John's son, his mistress Mavelyn, her lover Leo, and the upstart Corvino. By the end of the first act, Mavelyn has revealed a secret door in the walls of the house to Leo, and Corvino is taken to consuming worms. The play is scabrous and occasionally hilarious. The characters are contrary and capricious. Many of the more resonant lines might well be formula of power disguised in plain sight. Oh, I see. Yeah, so the bridge, I believe, does give you more than one option in terms of the aspects that you'll use. And in fact, I do know, I've actually noticed more people I talk to actually miss out on some of the hints in terms of who you should talk to open the door. So, like, it'll tell you, like, like Mrs. Kill, the midwife, rather than Mrs. Kill, but, knows how to sort of jimmy the lock, and Reverend Timothy has a spare key. Now, some of these people, depending on what legacy you play, are easier to get access to than others. But in any one of those cases, really you can decide, do I want to hire someone? Do I want to, use one of these memories that I've got? In the end, you've got a few different ways that you can... Sorry, I use Legacy from Cultist Simulator, but the journal that you have... So I don't know which one you wound up with, but I have the Silverbound Journal. I was rich, but something was missing. I am no longer rich, and still something is missing. Hush House is a place of conclusions, and here as librarian I may find mine. The magnate came to the house to conclude a history where they will find peace, but you can complete the game by recording any history. You might wish to begin your studies with the Hushery Wisdom. So, and then, I guess it's memories in this case, but yeah, the first one I did was the Twiceborn. So I was able to get Reverend Timothy for free that time, whereas this time around I get Mr. Kill, and technically Mrs. Kill. Okay, commandments for the preservation of all that exists. Black Ellie, Damascene matriarch of the Sisterhood of the Knot, was imprisoned by the Emperor Didius Julianus. She reportedly instructed that these secret doctrines be recorded in writing to preserve against their loss. Regrettably, the story goes, Didius Julianus ordered that the work be entombed with her in an unmarked sepulchre. Ellie describes powerful protective incantations to be used in a variety of circumstances. It is essential that these protections be completed every 4th year to defend against the entry of the worms and against the avidity of the wave and the wound. In the current history, at least, there is no indication that these protections have been performed regularly for at least the last 1,000 years. If you can just give me a second here, I'm actually going to take a quick look at something. Where is this? Okay. Yeah, it's a little personality test at the beginning of the game. So yeah, the funny thing is I feel a bit bad that I went for the journey. So I wasn't really thinking when I gave Yvette the which was it? I thought it was one of these. Or did she run off with the book? No, it's right here. Journey to the Grove. So Black Ellie, who much later became the Damascene matriarch of the Sisterhood of the Knot, recounts her journey to the Grove of Green Immortals. That does seem to have made... it does seem to have made... like Yvette suspicious. And I'm not entirely sure that's the fairest assessment. The commandments for the preservation of all that exists also seems like a... that feels like that's probably a more representative text of Ellie. Anyways, we made our choice, so... Kukrobit Prisoner Records, 1927. Accounts by Governor Collar's private secretary of interventions and experiments in the last years of the Kukrobit prison, focusing particularly on prisoners he believes might have Carapace Cross lineage. 2 prisoners suspected of Aniric crimes are encouraged to access their inner Carapace Cross tendencies and develop the attributes of the Segles kind, sickle-form pseudocrustacea. Regrettably, they lose the ability to breathe air. One dies, and Collars releases the other into the sea. Collars describes how he successfully induced an unstable carapace larva to develop into a greater form using insects and nectars techniques in the context of considerable moon aspect to awaken what would rather remain hidden. He hopes that similar techniques might be used to expedite the moral development of prisoners. Lake Fusino recordings of the folk dances of the Fusine marshes. The wailing of flutes, the roaring of drums, cries like birds lost in the marshes. These are the songs the sisters sang to the witch, that the Thunderskin roared to the sky, the songs with which the Dwendersons of the Mansis keep their vigil. Once heard, they're not forgotten. An Exorcist Field Manual, a practical guide to troublesome dead, grounded in theory, but with a clear focus on their disposal by the redoubtable Detective Austerry Wheellock of the Suppression Bureau. The dead usually avoid light, as the most immediate manifestation of eternity, which has no place for death. However, those dead uplifted by gold, that is to say touched by an actinic theoplasma, happily bought about in daylight, and are perhaps strongest at noon. If you are dead but uplifted by green, that's the Ring-Use blessing. The crown growth offers a similar but nastier benefit. This is how burgeoning risen come about, but there are different degrees of sentience and freedom depending on which growths are involved. The consciousness of one uplifted by green is always greatly altered, though. They never really seem like the same person, but they may have dregs of their original souls, but these are often replaced by something else. The upshot, invariably, is that they need to be set firmly on fire. The Moon's Egg, the third and last volume of the Meditations of Abbot Thomas of the Abbey of the Black Dove. Abbot Thomas speaks of the coming death he hears in the sound of the waves, but he rejoices that his blood will water the egg of the moon, by which he seems to mean the future. Deaths and Their Evasions. Father Stanislav John Schaller writes of the means and limitation of passage between the orders of the Mansus. No long names ours. Unusually, Father John has written this book in Fucine, for he says a special secrecy. He speaks very cautiously of the exceptions that can sometimes be made to the edicts of Chancel and Calyptra, and hints at the means by which he successfully returned a lantern long to flesh. Schaller mentions most cautiously of all that he has been permitted to see a book that speaks more deeply on the matter, but that it was surrendered into the shadow of a covenant stone of the Watchman's Tree. It can be retrieved if the 99th wink is reserved under the edict's liminal. Wistful air, let it rise in head and heart. Enchiridion Tragularis, the poison manual of the order of assassins called the Traguleri. The Traguleri, dartsmen, were employed by the Duties and their various incarnations to hunt down inhuman troublemakers. They developed poisons that even immortals called Long could not withstand. Immunity to their own poisons was a constant concern for the Traguleri, and they constantly dosed themselves with substances that might build up immunity. Perunculate, the notoriously toxic unsanctioned ink, can be used as a base for one of these, serpent milk, with sufficient scale and with the arts of serpents and venoms. And the Turquoise Hand, a calligraphic manual of Ramsund, which employs as exemplar text Fariduddin's Conference of the Birds. The book houses a numen, a truth so powerful it can perhaps believe itself. At noon the sun moves like the beating of a wing. At sunset he sends the herald child with her candle. At midnight he sends the wind that extinguishes the candle flame. Commentary, illustrations, and interleavings carry revelations never intended in the original, a sense of history, and the senses of histories. Okay, so we can go straight into leveling up Sand Stories. Thank you very much, Algrins. I hope you're doing well. And I'm just going to take a quick second here. I know chat went a little quiet for a bit. This might be because I answered all the questions, but if there's anything remaining, definitely feel free to speak up. I'll try and do a little bit of a better job dividing my attention. Okay, surgeries and exsanguinations. So that's heart and knock. All right, so I have a few options. So we've got sound. So then we also have Cheerful Ditty. I should probably do this like I do everything else, otherwise I'm going to forget an obvious one. Solace. Stolen Secret. Oh, of course, Threshold. Sorry, this one. Pattern. Salt. And I'm going to go for one extra for the simple reason that I don't have... I'm not going to have the consider verb open, so it may not be a good idea for me to include sound. But satisfaction will do the trick. And let me just double check that I actually have that right. Surgeries and exsanguinations. Yep, heart and knock. Okay. So I'm going to take care of the ones that I can get through the phonographs first. So in that case, we'll do the opening the sky. And then we'll do the Velletri interviews for the Stolen Secret. Okay, so now we go for the Solace. And then Pattern, Salt, and Satisfaction. Yep. No Fusine. Okay, so that should cover me for resurgences and emergences and surgeries and exsanguinations. So next is spices and savors. So that's a forge and nectar. So touch is a potential option here, but I want to take a look at my other options first. So none of these count. I would be able to use the Admonitory Automata project. In fact, I'll do that right now. So Foresight. Pattern, although that's currently occupied. Regret. Impulse. Earth sign. So I do need to use the touch. And I'm guessing we'll probably just use the Hive's Lament in this case. Or no, Scent. Okay, so that's not trivial, but we can get by. So let's at least get the Regret in. And we can do the Impulse because we've already used that. And then we have the Earth sign already, so I guess technically with the remaining... Actually, here's one thing I can do. I can use Caller's Desk. Now this needs Fusine, so that won't do the trick, but a Child's Treasury of Golden Afternoons should get me what I need. Okay, I'm feeling alright about that. And he gave me the Gossip, fair enough. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's so frustrating, we just need the one more. Actually, we still may be able to pull it off. Alright. Daymare. Grafin, Frederica, Dagmar, Sophia, Teresa, Helena, Begina, von Nagelsberg if you prefer. She doesn't. Hello, dear. Only me, I'm afraid. We're doing the Affair of the Other Horizon. Sailors have a term for the compass whirl phenomena that occurs before sightings of the city Ys. They say a compass has caught the giddy horizons. There is something of a giddy epidemic in the North Sea this year. On the Other Horizon. Never been to Ys. Always wanted to. Probably shouldn't. Terribly want to. Probably shouldn't. Fair Nyctodromus, don't you know? Fair to middling. Know my way up and down the bounds. Ys is something else. Need a good book on something else. Try a book with as much mystery rose as their rose interest. Just verse, maybe? Actually, we're reading just verse. So if I recall correctly, there aren't like simple rose books. So we'll do the Concursum Diaries. Oh, can't read Frisian. Can't read Hyksos either. Yeah, turns out those books are a little bit harder than they seem. On the Other Horizon. Found something. Might be something else. Might be something I'll regret. Mum's the word, hmm? Word to the wise. Pip pip, dear. Pip pip. This is the way to the woods, but perhaps the wood is not a suitable place for the librarian. So this is a little bit of a lumpy path to what I want, but I actually think I'm going to come out ahead on some of this. The skill is now level 8. Its power aspects have also increased. So we want to level up Resurgences and Emergences here. So Rain, Taste, Satisfaction, Impulse, Beguiling Melody, Gossip, and Named a Riddle. Now the funny thing about this one, I think I'll use the Tryst in this case. Or better still, I can use the Fete. At last I approach mastery. So the thing that's kind of neat here is I believe the Old Moment has a forge which I can use for spices and savors. So technically the Name Day Riddle has a knock. Hello, Kibble and Bricks. Technically, the knock or the Name Day Riddle has a knock that I can use in what was I going to say? The surgeries and exsanguinations. But we're actually kind of covered for that. No, there is no forge for Old Moment. My bad. What one was I thinking of? Anyways, doesn't matter. I may take a small break in a little bit just because I need a refill of my tea. And like I said, I didn't get that much sleep last night, so I am just feeling a little foggy. But mostly I just want the tea. All right, the Geminiad Volume 1, a fragile manuscript illuminated with twin shapes of sad and luminous beauty and with all the phases of the moon. It might be as old as the 7th century, but the language Fusine is much older. The cover is tooled goatskin decorated with garnet. These pages outline the nature and the doctrines of an hour that weaves together the willing, an hour that is sought beneath the moon and at the water's edge, the sister and witch. The language is willful, naughty, poetic. It'll take some untangling. The first volume of the Geminiad reminds us that the sister and witch has been known to manifest as the witch and sister, and that this face is always hungry, while the other face may heal. It implies connections between the sister and witch and the hours of the upper Mansus, especially the lunar hour called the Menascate, but it is ambiguous on whether the sister and witch is a Mansus hour proper, and it speaks at length about the sadness of the two who are one, the sadness that remains from their time as flesh. Oops. I meant to hit collect, not space. The Temptations of Architecture. Let's see if I can balance this out a little bit. The antiquarian and nyctodromist Ambrose Westcott writes of the dangers of doors, with particular reference to a house in the Bounds named Treowin. No doubt they have come to regret the ambitions of their winding stair even now in Treowin. A silver sea is unwisely visible from a rash window. Westcott explains that the wheel locks, the charge holders of Treowin, have had recourse to dramatic measures that prevent oniric encroachment, removing the entire top floor of the building. Nevertheless, he writes, the business of the Moon Hall has begun to touch the other business of the house. The Admonitory Automata Project. Footage of experimental devices under development in the Cucurbit under Governor Collar's supervision. The admonitory automata are nasty little things of spring and wire, but they all have merry faces of painted tin. The last item shown is a prototype towards something called a condignator, which, Collars says proudly, will allow a prisoner to elaborate their own punishment. He hastens to add that he hopes that in the coming era, punishment will be an entirely obsolete concept. Opening the Sky, an unusual recording of Varro's Opening the Sky, composed for the coronation of King Henry, the new king, Henry IX. The record bears the suppression stamp, Expunge. The first movement is soft, autumnal, the second unsettling, febrile. The third is bright, soaring, rapturous. The fourth movement is glassy, slithering, and a tintinnabulous icicle rattle. The fifth returns to the theme of the third, bright and rapturous once again, but this is a choral movement. It becomes apparent, though, that these are much, much too pure and high to be human voices. They recall birdsong, they recall the sweep of the windswept sky, blue turning black at the edge of the higher heaven, and they wrench the heart in a direction the Bureau does not permit. Sure, let me just catch up. So, Lord Gloom, how was your poking around in Book of Hours? And what is one of your current thoughts, Kibble and Bricks? Better now. Sorry, just reorganizing my treasury. I may need to start restoring elements of the soul, but for now I'm just gonna keep making a bit of money. Just Verse, a rare surviving copy of Christopher Allopoly's notoriously unsuccessful volume of experimental poetry published in 1912. Allopoly is clearly more interested in the occult than the aesthetic aspects of the work. By most measures, the rhymes are contrived, the meter inconsistent, the imagery banal. Still, even the worst verses have a compelling quality, and I find myself drumming my fingers on the desk to accompany their rhythms. In an afterword, Alapali discusses mnemonic holometaboli, by which he seems to mean a sort of crafting process where memories, when fed into a preliminal meter technique in the presence of enough knock or rows, can blossom and fissure into more potent versions of themselves. The Velletri interviews, interrogation of a man named Lacombe, a former nocturnal branch inspector now identified as terminally robogoid. Lacombe is not especially lucid, and the state called robogoia evidently includes a malady of the lungs which causes coughing fits. He weakens audibly over the course of the interrogation. He is questioned about the disposition of various unsanctioned items recovered from a nocturnal branch raid on Castle Ortuccio in the region of the Fucine Marshes. He is, however, defiant as well as incoherent. Lacombe insists that the items have been put to good use. He derides Nocturnal Branch as the lackeys of Calyptra. Alarmingly, during the last few minutes of his interrogation, he begins to insist that his interrogator should burn the library. He waxes enthusiastic about the fire he wants to see, leading to a final coughing fit, after which the interview abruptly ends. So you think that you're going to be restarting just now that you have your bearings a bit more, not that far yet. Yeah, if you want, Lord Gloom. The one thing I will say, though, is that you really don't need to reset the game to do it. I've had many... So actually, a good example here this would be an instance of a game that I've continued on since the beta for House of Light, where I didn't necessarily know what was going on. And a good example of this would be I did wind up giving something to a character, which through reading Commandments for the Preservation of All That Exists... I might have preferred to do it otherwise, but I'm not going to reset the playthrough over it. I also could reload, because it was just last stream that I did that. But I do kind of like the idea of seeing how the journey goes, even if I don't fully intend every step. So obviously, it's up to you in terms of how you'd like to handle it, but I can just let you know it is actually a satisfying way to play the game, to see how you work around eventualities that come up over the course of your playthrough. All right, the crime of the sky equals immortals having children. That is not technically the crime of the sky. One might fear that that leads to the crime of the sky. But you're kind of on the right track. I'd put it to you this way. In House of Light, which I believe you said you don't have, there is actually an encounter that... Oh, actually, come to think of it, it might be in the initial... No, I think actually when you run into the Weary Detective, I think he tells you something about the crime of the sky, and it would be difficult to reconcile it with that specific interpretation. But yeah, you're not wrong. That is not the crime itself. You're not wrong to make that association. But one of the things I've kind of learned about the author is they really do like to dangle the obvious in front of you and then just sort of have something hidden off in the corner. For instance, the character Hokebald of Posend is based off of actually it's an actor who I should have known. But he dangled just enough references to really indicate that it was Marlon Brando that it was based off of. But I believe his name's Joss Ackland. Anyways, that is the correct name, or that is the correct influence. But again, all of the hints that were given were true for the actor, and would have been true for Marlon Brando, except for a couple of very specific things that didn't quite line up. Anyways, on that note, I'm sorry to have been all over the map at the start, but I could use a refill on my tea. So I'm going to take just a short break to put the kettle on, refill my tea, have a bit of a stretch, and just kind of clear out the cobwebs. And then we'll be back. We'll see what happens with Ibn al-Adim and Lala Khaima, or Khaima. Yeah, we'll see where the rest of the day takes us. I should probably do the next 2 hours for without too many interruptions. But I will see you all in a little bit. Zrog, I just got back as soon as you wrote that. Thank you, everybody, for your patience. I know that was, whenever I have to fill the kettle, it always takes longer than I expected. And belated thank you for the cheer, Kibble and Bricks. I hope you're, well, I don't hope, I'm obviously happy to have you around, but I hope you are enjoying your research instead of hearing me say thank you. But if you are here to hear thank you for the bits. Okay. Sorry, I just wrote a bunch of IOUs on my notes. Okay. So I still have some memories to get through, so we'll go through these really quick. The Catalogue of Uncharted Pleasures. The Dark Gentleman is the only and rather grandiosely identified author of this often copied work. Some pleasures, the Formula Voluptuous attest, are so intense they can corrupt the laws of the physical world. This text catalogues some of those instances. Birth occurs at the conjunction of pleasure and torment, so the first forbidden acts of the forge birth sparks of delight which took root in the glory or in nowhere, who can say? So the seeds of the flower maker were planted, though for long years he was nothing but an unfulfilled ache. The Wound Wounds, a history of 100 wars sewn into a design of metallic threads that pursues itself across every page. Darius and Alexander at Issus, the incandescent strivings of the houses of Lancaster and York, the Second Worm War. The final page of the book depicts the first battles of a war among ours, but the threads fray into alternatives, unbraiding from history. One of those threads is a coarse iron wire whose twist suggests the disciplines of the Scar invoked before a subterranean configuration of iron, fire, and night. The Larkabine Codex. Christopher Larkabis claimed to have purchased 2 handwritten copies of the Codex from a family of witches on the shores of the Sea of Marmara. A third was given to the sea. The sister and witch came from the west, where they were born in 2 wombs, one a princess, one a monster. Nevertheless, they loved each other from birth, and met in secret to seek union. When the great drought came, the kings of that land tried to sacrifice the princess and the witch, so they sailed across the sea. When despair took them, they flung themselves into the drowning waters, and so found the Painted River, where they entered the Mansus through the offices of the Red Grail. Nevertheless, the Codex ends with the condemnation of the Grail. The Locksmith's Dream Trespasses, the 3rd volume of Teresa Galmier's examination of parallels in the mystic dreams of artisans. In this volume, notoriously, Galmier's prose begins to disintegrate, and it is not clear which dreams are in fact her own. The woman in the sand-colored robe has told me, the stairways of the Mansus go ever up, death is down, the mother of ants guards both directions with each of her heads, and so the passage must always be through a wound. I think the white door might be a wound. That's one reason the dead sometimes pass it. I think I have the other half of the secret now, and I hope my reader can put both halves together. And a Child's Treasury of Golden Afternoons. I figure because Zrog is so insistent on getting a Numa book, this'll be the one that you can get. Successfully in about 10 minutes returned to where I just was. Yeah, so this is the funny thing about a game like this too, right? Because the mystery is some of the enjoyment. Something that'll take... I think the demo probably took me about an hour or 2. Yeah, we're about the same time in terms of first playing the game, Lord Gloom. Now, obviously, I talk too much, so I'm sure there's a little bit of system talk to be a fudge factor for that. But this is the thing, right? Like when you... I'm just trying to think what sort of fun challenges I can talk about without giving it away. Okay, so here's an example. Finding out the identity of the new king. Like, that's going to be something that you probably even forget. Or actually, here's another one for you. Finding out about the fire, which is clearly not present in the beginning of the the game, right? It mentions that Hush House was abandoned in a fire, but the place seems to be largely intact. That's a kind of mystery where actually between the beta and this version of the game, there were more little reminders saying like, hey, remember that fire that was mentioned before? Whatever happened to that? And I think it's because, you spend so much time solving the mysteries that it's sometimes easy to forget some of the interesting things that the game was dangling in front of you. So what'll be kind of interesting, I think, is you may, over the course of your playthroughs, I don't know if you plan on playing it more than once, but you may actually find that some of these things that you may find that like some of the things that you thought were impossible at some point are pretty standard after a while. Although I should say probably the best person on this one would be, I think probably Zerog. If I'm not mistaken, you're almost done sort of your standard library endings. I believe Zerog has probably played more individual games than any of us in chat right now. I may play a lot of Book of Hours, but I definitely don't have a lot of endings. I just tend to have a really, really deep engagement with the few runs that I do. Not that I trade it off. Like I definitely like savoring this game. I like sharing it with all of you. A child's treasury of golden afternoons. Once upon a time, a very bad man encoded very bad secrets into the charming illustrations of a book of charming stories. Wake the pictures and you will see. Lord Jacob Gristwood, surgeon, ethnologist, philanthropist. There is no proof that he ever kept children in hutches beneath his bed. There is no proof he vivisected cats at dinner with his penknife. The Suppression Bureau keeps its secrets. Here is your paint, whispered the wolf to the pale girl. Here is your knife for scraping, and here is your face. Merciless alteration. All right. I think what I'll do here, actually, I need a minute to think. Okay, so I do surgeries and exsanguinations. I should have 1, 2, 3. Okay, no, we're fine. And I was going to use door and wall for that. So I'm just going to... one of the reasons I needed that small pause was I need to delete the other... Yeah, there we go. So it's spices and savors, strings and songs, and sights and sensations. My friend just switched eras to the modern era in his Civ game, and he's like, they took away all my advantages! That's probably going to be the one that people get really annoyed at. And I think it's a good choice, actually, for number 7. But you're kind of prepping playing this game so you don't completely fumble around on the stream, so it might restart a third time from scratch. I kind of get the game's language now. Yeah, I mean, so make no mistake, Lord Gloom, there is always, until you have played the game all the way through, and even then I will tell you for sure that there was one secret of the house that I did not find until my second playthrough. But I'll say until you actually get to the end of a game, there's always going to be something that... how do I put it? It doesn't, like, there's always going to be something to stop you from, like, that perfect run, let's say, or that, you know, that final, that final mastery. Like, there's always going to be something that keeps you from making progress. And part of it is just sort of learning to be comfortable with that feeling lost. And obviously, it also depends on your audience. Like if you have an audience of people who really want stuff pushing forward no matter what, it does mean that Book of Hours can be a tricky one. Now I don't get the impression that that's your audience, but yeah, that is a little bit of the hazard of playing it. Weird question. Will you know when the game ends? Yes. There is so like the one ending that isn't an ending is if you take your journal, renounce what could be, my journal won't survive a second soaking. This will destroy your journal, which makes it impossible to complete the game. You'll be stuck, but you can do it if you really want. So, yeah, like that's really the only ending where there's no I mean, even then, that's an unambiguous sign. It's just prior to actually committing the act. But it will be, I'll put it to you this way. The specific goal, one that's going to be something that's determined by you. There's a specific set of actions that you will perform at the end of the game. And it may not, well, it's definitely not obvious at the start exactly what those actions are. However, it does, it is, so you've got this first little bit of guidance here, right? The magnate came to the house to conclude a history where they will find peace, but you can complete the game by recording any history. You might wish to begin your studies with the Hushery wisdom. So there's this idea of recording a history that once you are on the path to doing that, and I don't think the game's too mysterious about how you record the history, although it doesn't necessarily say it at the very, like, it doesn't spell it out for you at the start either. But I'd say once you're on the path to writing a history, you will be given just enough breadcrumbs to say, here is here's the path that gets me to a definitive ending. And then I can tell you that when you do beat the game, there's actually a little trophy room of all the different endings that you've gotten. So that'll be another thing that you can look forward to. As Rock says, from someone who has 11 endings, I still don't know everything. And yes, endings are deliberate and have a point of no return message. Yeah, that's actually a better way of putting it. The Sanskar Journal. You're the archaeologist who found themselves in a certain tomb. I recommend reading the Barrow Child's Elegies when you get a chance. Okay, so for the Forge and Nectar run, so we've got our Earth Sign. Let's put the Hive's Lament in just for the heck of it. Actually, you know what? We can probably go without the Hive's Lament. So we can get a pattern. We've got the Regret, we've got the Impulse, we have the Earth Sign, so then it's the Touch and the Scent. Okay, well, with that in mind, let's... Oh, heaven's sake. Sorry, just... so... It's such a clever move. I, like, put my finger right on my glasses lens. I think it was pretty obvious to me that I was going to go Faust and knock. It's like, I seem to be some sort of god. I'll take it. The game knows me well. God's probably not the right way. Demigod. Okay, so I was originally looking for what I could use to level up spices and savors, but in this case here, so I've got Foresight, Pattern, Regret, Impulse, Earth Sign, Touch, and Scent for 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Good God. Sorry, this smudge is really stubborn. Okay, Foresight, Pattern, Regret, Impulse, Earth Sign. See, I actually just need the... nope. I mean, I guess I can do both, but... But yeah, the Newman gives me one that I wasn't accounting for. Now, Strings and Songs is the next one. I believe that is Sky and Heart. Yes, so it's good that I cleared out the... Oh, I see the challenge on this one. Yeah, I think I can get all but one done tonight. Okay, but let's get the basics down. So, back to Thyrsis Phonograph. For that, let's use the... I'm running out of stuff to throw at it. So we'll do the Invisible Opera. So that's to get the Cheerful Ditty. We will listen to the Lake Fusino recordings again. So 3. Right now I'm just looking for Sky. Four. Five. 6. Okay, so that takes care of Strings and Songs. So then it's Sights and Sensations is the last one, which also has a Sky requirement. So I'm going to collect as much winter as I can on this one. The rest of the Sky will come later, obviously, but I need to focus on what I can get right now. Feels weird not to have Nin's cages beside each other. Out of curiosity, were you all able to see... I'm assuming you all were able to see that best viewers spam, right? Or does Twitch now suppress those automatically? Okay. Daymare decided not to seek Ys, definitely, under no circumstances. Lalakaima, Huntress Gourmier, occasional bureau consultant. When it can't be killed and it really needs killing, Chaima's the one they turn to. These are the things I need to know. Ys lies beyond the wave. This we both know, but my employer suspects their emissaries have crossed the wave to come here, to these shores. Does she know Frisian? She does not. I am wasting my time, it is certain. The emissary of Ys do not pass beyond the bounds, but I have been paid to waste my time, and so I must make absolutely certain. Oh, I've already given her Let Just First, so... Hints and fireside tales only, but enough to direct my search. I will find nothing, but I do not like to leave a task half finished. You know, no, we're fine. I was just thinking about secret thresholds, but we'll be fine. I am going to run short a little bit on elements of the soul to use to upgrade my the various skills, but I think we'll still be able to see the day through. Let's use the Wine Dark Chair. Investigate this object. You won't use this up or consume it by doing this. So what I may need to do for the rest of the day, we'll get spices and savors leveled up for sure. I will... Oh, you know what? I think I doubled up. Yeah, I think the regret's gonna be a waste. Ablations in iron. So that'll get me Inks of Containment, which is Moon and Winter. Yeah. Yeah, so I wasted a couple elements of the soul, which doesn't feel great, but... Okay, on imperfections, Pomander, Lightsmith, and Lantern-Long describes the process of transinhabitation, which he calls a manifestation of imperfection. Lantern-Long lack bodies, and so cannot normally leave the Mansis, but they can study glint in the physical world by establishing a road of glass. Pomander notes with disgust that the Order of Long called the Obliviates refer to it as scrying, which he considers a debased term. Pomander explains the benefits of transinhabitation, that a Lantern-Long can affect the senses and thoughts of those nearby, that they can even enter their spirits, and that they can employ the senses of those inhabited to experience again the scent of blossom and season. This seems to be what interests him most. He insists that a lantern long should not ever inhabit a mirror of silver, should only ever inhabit a mirror of silver, not silvered glass, but he declines to explain why. The Mirror of Melissenth, the day book and dream journal of Abbess Melissenth, venerated as a saint and respected as an alchemist. Melissenth speaks longingly of those we would call from behind the sky. Melissenth claims that the sights and sensations arts that she describes can be used to invoke a dream of a star when sufficient sky aspect is invoked to uplift an ascendant harmony. Oh no! Tiddly tiddly tum tee diddle tum. That's another cheerful ditty, but I wanted a wistful air. The Lake Fusina recordings of the folk dances of the Fusine marshes. The wailing of flutes, the roaring of drums, cries like birds lost in the marshes. These are the songs the sisters sang to the witch, that the thunderskin roared to the sky, the songs with which the Dwendrozones of the Mansis keep their vigil. Once heard, they are not forgotten. Hey, Vesper, good to see you. Folks, for those of you who do not know Vesper. Actually, sorry, I didn't do any shout-outs today, so we had, I believe we had Kibble and Bricks and Hisley the Fox, who are streamers of this game, in here. Lord Gloom is also a streamer, and in fact, well, obviously in terms of the chat, some people mentioned streaming the game. But Lord Gloom is somebody who we originally connected over Brace Yourself Games, Cobalt Core. Lord Gloom plays a lot more card games than I do, but as you can sort of see, has been branching out, and sounds like Lord Gloom will be playing Book of Hours on their stream before too long. But last but not least, we have got Vesper Fortune, who has been doing... I wanted to say it looked like a visual novel, but I'm never 100% sure what you're playing, Vesper. You frighten me. But anyways, Vesper Fortune is a wonderful broadcaster, has got a VTuber persona, has done everything from sort of the these sort of lectures on things like the old Satanic Panic. I realize this is a bit of an older video that you've done now. I've seen play Blasphemous, just generally a very broad variety streamer, somebody who I like hanging out with, and somebody who's been impossibly generous to the stream, so has created a Be Right Back screen for when I go and get tea, has been donating multiple games to the stream, and ones that I do intend to play at some point in the future. So this would be the Ace Attorney series, as well as, I can never remember the full name. Is it Dengranapona? Anyways, Trigger Happy Havoc is a nice subtitle. Danganronpa? Oh, actually, if I look at the cover, it's got Dangan and then Ronpa on the bottom. Anyways. Incredibly generous and friendly broadcaster. Obviously, the reason to watch him is not because he gives me stuff. That's a reason for me to watch him. But definitely somebody who has invested in the stream, is very complimentary in his assessments of the clown show that you see before you, and somebody again who's just fun to hang out with and sort of has some neat ideas on things. So always a pleasure to see you around, Vesper. Okay, the Wine Dark Chair, an elegant 18th century piece imported from France. There were 12 of these, but Gervinus van Loren had most of them broken up and burnt the week after his arrival. Bad memories was all he would say. Those Who Do Not Sleep, the Mystic Broadnax discusses the origins of the Sister and Witch and of the Thunderskin. The Sister and Witch were born in two wombs, one poor, one rich, across the sea. The sister was stronger in the aspect of heart, and so their survival was assured. The witch was stronger in the aspect of grail, and so they were not satisfied. When the sister and witch came west, the Red Grail permitted their ascension, but then grew jealous of their power. It lured a great musician into the ranks of its names, and caused him to be reborn from blood as a heart hour, so that the Grail might maintain dominion there also, but its victory is not assured. The Invisible Opera, unfinished recording. A recording of a 1911 attempt at a performance of Wings Within Wings, the so-called Invisible Opera. The singers complete the Skewbald aria, Beneath Our Skin, and Rose and Maya without incident, but the Invisible Opera is dedicated to Farazref the Magpie, who delights in unexpected interruptions. The recording ends with a clamor of horrified voices, a grating metallic screech, and a soft brass buzzing that fades into burring silence. This is actually one thing that surprised me based on Vesper's comment here, is that while he gave us that nice Be Right Back screen, is not some, like, the drawing just seems to be purely for the love of it. Like, it was a very nice gift that he gave to the stream, as opposed to being some kind of commission or anything else. It was just something kind of done out of the kindness of his heart, which I thought was very nice. Or I don't know, my green eyes and charisma compelled it, but I'm going to go with the first option. Isaac of Karth's History of the Shadowless Kings, a true and accurate history of the Shadowless Kings by Isaac of Karth. Isaac describes the 1,000-year ascendancy of the Shadowless Empire. The first and greatest history is described herein. The Persian Empire, the son of Achaemenes, the Shadowless Kings, the most glorious empire, survives the assaults of Alexander the Great and flourishes as late as the 5th century. After the fall of Rome, the Shadowless Empire takes Byzantium under its wing and moves east against the land of the Great River. Isaac begins to recount the invasion struggling against the unskinned armies of the Hooded Serpents, but ends abruptly with a series of incantations that he claims allowed the Shadowless Empire to persist. Well, that's fine, I'm just another person too, but it's always nice to give people... I do apologize, obviously it doesn't mean as much when those present aren't here, but I was sort of out to lunch a little bit on my various shoutouts, so we did actually have quite a few Book of Hours streamers all in at one time, so definitely for those of you looking for people who to stream the games, essentially if you probably just click on a name in chat and hit follow, you're probably going to find a Book of Hours streamer. The Barrowchild's Elegies. The Barrowchild, a Gaulish adept who won a place in the ranks of the Order Lamea, enumerates the great shadows laid to rest in tombs of power and discusses their various conditions. The Barrowchild identifies numerous modes that are neither true death nor true life: the vitrification of the heart, the corrupt light of the wood, core stasis, the wandering of the fet. The Barrowchild warns particularly of the avidity of tryst, where a remnant shadow's longing for change survives its sense of self and even devours its wist. That lying may draw the curious into the tomb, where the remnant shadow changes so that it cannot be distinguished from its visitor, or that the reverse becomes true, and that it is never again possible to say whether it is the shadow or the visitor that exits the tomb. Unhatched Hymns. Hymns attributed to St. Lucia the Eyeless, patron of glassworkers and name of the hour called Meniscate. The hymns venerate every sanctioned hour, celebrating them as the sun undivided, but also suggesting that each hour may become the next, madrigad to watchman, watchman to wolf, and so on. The Hymn of the Phases celebrates the Meniscate from whom we do not turn, for the truth which is beauty, the beauty which is truth, and the perfect balance between the two. The Hymn of the Reflections more puzzlingly celebrates the Meniscate as sister of Janus, mother of Shadow, whose visage wondrous in emptiness can reveal all truths. Nin's Cages, the Avignon text, the merciful measures of the witch Nin. Nin's stated aim was to keep beyond the walls of sleep that business which should not trouble the world. This includes fever, madness, and delirium, as well as spirits identified as devourers and deceivers. Nin warns against cutting hair, cracking mirrors, spilling blood, or invoking the edicts liminal or inviolable before sleep, for no matter how secure a lock may be, its key will surely open it. Glimmerings, an anonymous prison diary written by a dreamer convicted of oniric irresponsibility and confined to the Cucurbit. The prisoner is plainly terrified and bewildered by their situation, and has been unable to wrangle a coherent explanation out of anyone. The dreams keep coming, and they keep writing them down. Snow, broken mirrors, half-heard sky music, flowers of white, red, and black, a blood-streaked winter dawn, the most notorious signifiers of oniric risk, fantastically vivid and detailed. No wonder they were locked up. Their final recorded dream is of a worm jewel beneath Brandkrug Isle, which they open with a key carved from their finger bone. All right, we have a heck of a lot of stuff to do, so let's catch up. So first things first, spices and savors. So this one I'll employ the health, seeing as I'm least likely to need that for other things. So I believe we were using door and wall on that one. Okay, sorry. So yes, it was door and wall. So definitely the touch. Yep, no way around using a couple of the precious ones. Okay, so I also want to prepare for strings and songs, which is heart and sky. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Right, because I did not make the... Okay, yep, I've got this. So, not my favorite, but we will take strings and songs. Oh, this is going to put me really far behind. Okay, I'm going to use the Curious Hunch instead. So I'll set aside the core and the whist to do the level up. So we've got 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, we're close, but we're not over. So I'll do Gemini at 3. I think it's been a while. So 3. I'm going to skip over this one for now. 4. Six. Trying to decide which of these I want to read. We'll do what does not bark. 7. Okay, so it's rather important that I get strings and songs leveled up as soon as possible. That's why I didn't go for the Wistful Air. Olachaima set out to hunt the emissaries of Ys on the Bureau's commission, though even with what she had learnt at Brankrug, she did not expect to find them. Dr. Ibn al-Adim, the Alapine, historian, doctor, and above all, traveler. The good doctor has been associated with all but one of the libraries of the Watchman's Tree. He was even secretary nunciant of Hush House for a little while, but he has never been on good terms with the Suppression Bureau. Peace be with you. I ask entry to the house. On the other horizon, passage to Ys is forbidden, so thoroughly forbidden that even the laws against it are not generally known. But there are always exceptions. I imagine a librarian of the Watchman's Tree will understand exceptions, and try a book with as much mystery rose as their rose interest. Ys itself is a place of exceptions. I wonder if the answer lies in that, or in something closer to home. When Hendrik de Wolf was still a mercenary captain, his company was employed to patrol the bounds. I suspect that is why the king appointed him lord of this place. I would not say exactly that one can travel to Ys from Brankrug, but I believe that Brankrug would be a good place to begin that journey. Thank you, librarian. So the plan here is that when winter comes along, we will we'll have a freebie with whatever visitor comes, but we'll go straight into the next event. And if that works, then that's basically going to be how I use these remaining invitations. Okay, the skill is now level 8. Its power aspects have also increased. So we go for strings and songs. At last I approach mastery. Improve the skill to level 8. So a little bit of a shame to lose the Curious Hunch, but honestly, it's most of the time I just lose it to the next salon, so while we wait for the remaining... I think Ragged Crossroads is the next one that gets leveled up. The Geminiad Volume 3, a fragile manuscript illuminated with twin shapes of sad and luminous beauty, and with all the phases of the moon. It might be as old as the 7th century, but the language Fusine is much older. Coral decorates its cover, and its page edges are sharp enough to slash a throat. These pages outline the nature and the doctrines of an hour that demands the union of what has been separated, an hour that is sought at the water's edge and beneath the moon, the witch and sister. The language is elusive, enigmatic, intricate. It'll take some untangling. The 3rd volume of the Geminiad reminds us that the witch and sister has been known to manifest as the sister and witch, and that this face may heal while the other face is always hungry. It implies connections between the witch and sister and the hours of the wood, especially the secret keeper called the Velvet, but it is ambiguous on whether the witch and sister is a wood hour proper, and it speaks at length about the sadness of the two who are one, the sadness that remains from their time as flesh. Chion at Abydos, a play dealing with the 9-year sojourn of a snow goddess in the Thracian city of Abydos by Apollo Fireweaver, in English, published in 1892, purportedly from an older Greek text. The entity called Chion arrives in a blizzard and demands the city gates are barred. As Abydos falls under her spell, the dead return but do not speak. For 8 years, the city is a place of slow death, frosty ecstasy, and silent beauty, but in the 9th year, a conspiracy of shouts is mounted against the quiet that Chion demands. The conspirators open the city gates, and a scarred man comes to drag Chion out by the hair. Summer returns, but the conspirators die of remorse. Better now. The origins of hours. The sage and ecstatic Soham, a frequent visitor to the Mansus, claimed to have discoursed with the breech crow in person. Soham later insisted on a sky burial. Soham's writings veer from poetry to confession. He identifies from flesh, those who were mortal, from blood, those who arose from sacrifice, from light, the entry from the glory, and from stone, those who arose before his knowledge. He insists that the moth was the first god who was blood, but later contradicts himself and claims it was the Red Grail. The Mansus was different before the first god came from light, but never doubted existed, even then. What does not bark? Alexander Props writes warily of Calyptra, a law, principle, or society which prevents the dissemination of dangerous knowledge. Calyptra, like the planet that occludes the star, or the Doylean dog that fails to bark, can be identified only by its absence. Even the name, I think, must be a mask. Calyptra is said to make exceptions specifically for the libraries of the Watchman's Tree. Does it mean make those exceptions so the Hours can make use of them? And Singlefoot songs. Father Stanislav John Schaller, priest and diplomat, writes of his time on the slopes of Huashan, near the Grove of Green Immortals, but never too near. Schaller's relations with the Grove are cautious. It's a library of the tree, but under the hand of the hour named Applebright. In time, however, Schaller comes to be more sympathetic to the Applebright, which he suggests causes harm only when so invited. The Singlefoots of the title are one-horned, one-footed hill things with sweet but powerful voices, powerful enough to open the mountain. The Singlefoot sometimes trample pilgrims, sometimes heal them, sometimes coerce them to enter the mountain and become Singlefoots. Schaller explains that when he found this last becoming too tempting, he decided to return to his homeland. One interesting thing from what you mentioned, Vesper, I think in some cases, so when I think of like science fiction or fantasy stuff that I like, I kind of have two tracks. In one sense, I think maybe this is just sort of the movie angle of things, and just I like spectacle. I like, stuff that's just kind of cool to watch. But excuse me, in some cases, powers or abilities, or eccentricities are justifiable because they're just so darned interesting. And I actually don't think there's anything wrong with that approach. If nothing else, it comes up a lot in the stuff that we see. But one of the things I really respected, this is more so, I'd say, in the Hushery branch of the Tree of Wisdoms. But there were a couple of entries in there which actually made me realize that, the whole idea of winter and silence and why... Like, it gave me some indications in terms of why they are silent and why they feel that that's important. And I think that's one of the things that really raises this game above some of the other things that I might, I would normally sort of put on my, interesting fantasy list. And again, like I always feel a little self-conscious whenever I'm doing certain comparisons because, inevitably, I don't know, maybe this is like the econ background actually coming in, but like, you very often will sort of define an order on things and comparisons and such. And I never want it to seem like because I'm mentioning one, the other is trash. That very often comes up in like internet dialogue and such. But on the other hand, I do want to sort of highlight the ones that are more difficult and something that, for me at least, is more treasured for its rareness. Also, just kind of the skill involved. But again, like so, I've been thinking kind of about comics a little bit more over the past few months. I think it's just because they've actually wound up being really good analogies when I talk about this stuff. But you can think of sort of a universally well-regarded comic, Watchmen. And I mean, Watchmen is one that's probably even more relevant today just because there's an often unacknowledged debt that a lot of these other, you know, these other like the stuff that we watch tends to follow in the footsteps of Watchmen. So like this seems to be the first comic which kind of took the idea of saying, you know, if the kinds of heroes that we look in comic book stories were actually real people, they would be frightening and pretty crazy. And it took that idea and really ran with it in an interesting way, which is why I think it is as respected as it is. But one unfortunate side effect of that seemed to be that there was maybe the wrong emphasis placed on some of the features that made that story worthwhile. So, you know, you'll see someone with a limp, and like that's the thing that makes them an interesting character, rather than, you know, a character like Rorschach, which is basically, this is what Batman would be like if he, you know, if he was an actual person, you know, this degree of sort of moral certainty that makes him a very violent and dangerous person. So much so, you know, you might call him a hero because he seems to be like one of the people who's doing the more right thing than some of the other stuff, but like he's not the sort of person you'd really want to talk to. And again, like that is obviously running down a lot of works that people have done. That is kind of one of the more negative cases, but that does seem to be one consequence that came out of that. But it's also kind of, you can see why that happened as well. You know, I think to a certain extent there are people who get a lot of satisfaction. I mean, it's the comics audience, right? You've got Spider-Man, or you've got, you know, the X-Men. You know, you've got a woman whose ability is to manipulate storms, and you have, you know, a guy with actual claws that come out of his, you know, I guess that's not the mutant power was like the regeneration, but like, you know, obviously this is stuff that's really cool, right? It's kind of the same reason why Philip K. Dick seems to have done very well in terms of film adaptations. There are these twists that make for fun plots, and they're interesting, thought-provoking ideas. And so it's, you know, the sort of high concept stuff that works really well on the big screen. But then there's a big difference in terms of all of the different sort of Philip K. Dick stories that you get. So like on one hand, you've got like Minority Report and Blade Runner. And I'd say that these are very good adaptations of Philip K. Dick's work that, you know, really do, or actually, sorry, I really should also be including in that a Scanner Darkly. I would certainly put that very, very high on that list. You know, I think these are taking the ideas and taking them in interesting places and making sure that they are adapting it to film, as opposed to just like, yeah, here's a good yarn, you know, here's your budget, just, you know, make more back than we spend on it. But then there's also some stories which, you know, for one reason or another don't quite land as well. And it's maybe not even necessarily due to some, you know, obviously the source material is pretty good. I think Philip K. Dick's a very talented writer. But, you know, the thing that it was picked up for was just largely, you know, scratching that particular itch. So you want to make sure that you deliver on that itch, and you meet the spec, basically. So this is such a long and tortured example, but, you know, if it's a fantasy setting, if you've got something that just looks cool, sometimes it's okay to just include it because it looks cool, right? It entertains the audience, and if it's a movie, you know, it's usually visually impressive. If it's a book, it's just something that conjures a particular image in mind, and its existence is kind of justified because that's why people are going and looking at that thing. So like William Goldman of Marathon Man fame, I'm trying to remember which book he wrote this on, but he talked about watching This is an old movie. It's like an old Nicolas Cage movie, The Rock. And in it, I think Nicolas Cage has captured Sean Connery, who's a criminal, and he has him like he's like he has him in his custody. And Sean Connery, escapes, and he gets in a car, and there's this car chase. And a few minutes into this car chase, which is it's a Michael Bay movie, right? So it's exciting car chase, all the things that you kind of come to expect from Hollywood. And Goldman kind of writes about thinking it's like, well, obviously Connery gets away because you wouldn't spend this much time, doing a car chase, big expensive set piece if it didn't advance the plot. And those of you who've seen The Rock knows how this ends, right? The car crashes and Nicolas Cage catches Sean Connery, and he's back in Cage's custody. And of course, the point Goldman made, he's not saying this is a good thing. He's just observing that what was then modern cinema at the time does not necessarily care about what makes sense plot-wise or what's about advancing the plot. The car chase is the point. And I kind of lie somewhere in between, because I feel like these do not need to be in competition. That I think you can fit a car chase into a story at the right time while still also advancing that story. But listen, I'm not gonna. I'm never gonna make a movie as successful as The Rock. So my opinions on that can remain my opinions. So like I said, the idea here is that I am rather forgiving if something that is sufficiently cool justifies itself by being cool. And yet when I remember, I think the thing that was so satisfying about reading those sections of the Hushery wisdom in this was I'd played Cultist Simulator, and I'd seen the winter aspects, and I kind of said, ooh, the gothy one. But then the game, this game started talking a bit about language and a few implications from that. And all of a sudden now, oh, okay, so language does have something to play. And oh, actually, this idea of silence is not just this cool idea where you say, well, how do you know it's a winter aspect thing? Oh, it's really quiet. But instead it's like, no, there's actually a whole sort of belief, and there's a whole set of events that happened, and there's a very specific reason for that silence. And it kind of comes back to that stuff we were talking about when I read the essay by the writer for this game, Against World Building, where it is, one, it is still interesting. Two, there is this coherence to the world that even though this game never comes out and just says it all, and I mean, as far as I can tell, unless something changes, I do not believe that there are any intentions whatsoever to go out and have a like, okay, this is what this all was about. Oh, sorry, I was really worried for a second that I'd lost the Radical Measure. I don't think there's any intention to do a this is what was secretly going on in the background release or something like that. It's ultimately up to it's like David Lynch movies, right? David Lynch is no longer with us. Whatever you get out of those movies is what they're about, right? And in fact, as someone who is beyond frustrated with every single video that has movie title ending explained, I've never watched those videos. I never will watch those videos. I think the fact that you have things like Titanic ending explained suggests that we're not necessarily dealing with an audience that is capable of subtle and interesting thoughts. And I think to a certain degree, people may be, how do I put this? Like, people will be uncomfortable with that. But I also think I have a lot of respect for people who just let something stay. Like let something stay wonderful. Let people just deal with the uncertainty with it. It may not be a comfortable feeling, but I don't know. A lot of the works that I really like tend to follow that. Tend to be willing to say, you may not like this, but I'm forcing you to just, make of this what you will, right? You can decide what you want to take away from it, and it's it's okay if you think something different from the person beside you. I actually think we would be better off if we had more stuff like that, and if we were a little more comfortable with it than we seem to be. How are you doing tonight, Tiberiosity? Sorry, I realized it was a manifesto on different movies and games and such, but I think it's just because it's relatively rare. Okay. The Alpine suspected that Hendrik de Wolf had been no ordinary mercenary captain, and that a connection between Brandkrug and Ys meant he might begin a journey to Ys here on the Isle. So if everything went according to plan, we should... this should get collected and not have any other visitors. Now, let's see what I can do. So I'm going to get the Earth sign back. And I'm actually thinking what I might try here... we are going to lose the old moment tomorrow, so maybe I can try to get the confounding parable back. Or curious hunch, rather. That's a big knock one, though, so I need another... Oh, that's a darn shame. Oh, hang on. I've been meaning to try this forever. So if I go to the Rowanarium... The Rowanarium will take a key. Yep. Have you seen Twin Peaks before, Vesper? Somebody gave a really fun analogy to it that I never thought of before, but like I don't necessarily think it's a good description of Twin Peaks, but it's one that made me smile. But I want to see if you've seen it before. The skill is now level 8. Its power aspects have also increased. But a lot of things you've enjoyed over the years have been inspired. Very much so, yes. One of the things that actually... So I've been thinking about David Lynch a lot since the news, but one of the things that really caught my attention, and I've known this, like I think I first found out about David Lynch around... middle school, I think, and that was around the time I was starting to get into movies. So I watched a lot of stuff that was definitely not age appropriate, but let me just catch up with the text here. Wrapped in the King, detailed accounts of secret bacchanals and ecstatic dances observed in necropolises and graveyards in southern Europe, in Egypt, and in Anatolia. The author is a self-confessed ghoul, an eater of buried flesh. He claims to have witnessed the dances while at his feasting. The dances draw from the traditions of the mysteries of the cults of Isis and of Sybil, but include both symbolic and literal flayings, and the human heart is always central in the rites. The author punctuates his accounts with queasily sensuous descriptions of his own interrupted feasts. At these greater feasts, a black pig is always crowned as king before its slaying. On this occasion, its heart was weighed in the balance against a knot of feathers, and its skin became a cape for the officiant. Its flesh was left for the crows, but I must confess my interest was not in its carcass, but in the perfumed flesh of the milliner laid fresh in the earth. So I don't know if it was the first one I saw. I saw The Elephant Man. I thought that was very, very good. I still think The Elephant Man is a really outstanding movie. Like, the thing that's so unfortunate about it is that David Lynch obviously has the reputation for the, like, weird stuff that he did. And the weird stuff is great. But there is something truly magnificent about the Elephant Man. Just this very humane, empathetic, wonderful, wonderful story. And it's not even like that's an unusual thing in his in the work that he did. Like, there's also stuff like The Straight Story. The other thing that's kind of fun for me about David Lynch is that I have occasionally had like sort of not even love-hate, but like I felt differently about things. So I remember I saw Blue Velvet, and I was really struck by that when I saw it first. But then there's like a new theater that Vancouver had made specifically for sort of international and sort of art house sort of stuff. And they showed a print of Blue Velvet there. And I remember really feeling, I don't know why, but it just did not connect with me at all. Like I actually felt it was a bit of a disappointment. I do have a copy of it though. I actually kind of want to watch it again, but like I haven't even necessarily thought it's like they're the most brilliant movies I've ever seen each time I see them. But what has been true, and this is all the time that I've watched his movies, his movies never ever seem to get any kind of credit at the time. It's always after the fact when people recognize it. So, and the person, like, I don't particularly care for this film critic, but like Roger Ebert just seemed to hate David Lynch. Like, never, I think maybe said something nice about Eraserhead. I don't even know that. But like just about every movie, at every review I have seen prior to Mulholland Drive is Ebert disliking the movie. And in fact, the poster for Lost Highway has very prominently states 2 thumbs down from, I guess it was Siskel and Ebert, 2 more great reasons to see Lost Highway. And like, I remember, oh God, what was it? It's like when Mulholland Drive, it was Ebert's review said something along the lines of like, David Lynch has been working towards this his entire career, and for it, I can forgive him. And I'm like, you are not in a position to forgive this guy anything. You know, you should be apologizing for your reviews. And there's like another person who I don't understand. I mean, at least Ebert like was a film critic and, you know, for better or worse, contributed what he had to say. I don't get why anybody cares about Quentin Tarantino's film opinions. But like, you know, Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me, which is a story that makes me so amazingly sad, but is a really wonderful one. That seems to be one that was like hated at its release. And I think that one I can kind of understand, because if people like the TV show, that movie is very, very different from the TV show. And that could potentially have been somebody's first experience of like a David Lynch movie, which is, you know, that's going to be a lot to take if you don't quite know what you're signing up for. But I mean, Tarantino said something along the lines, you know, like he's up his own ass. I'll never watch, you know, another one of his movies again. And I mean, coming from somebody like Quentin Tarantino, that's a little more than I can take, hearing that man say that anybody's up their own ass. Like, there is a certain point at which you just need to, just switch off. Like, and again, because I occasionally look at film stuff on YouTube, I'm just subjected to like 20 videos, which is like Quentin Tarantino on da da da. It's like, I could not be less interested in this, right? I'll listen to like William Friedkin talk about his stuff, right? I'll listen to Orson Welles do an interview on his film career. If Stanley Kubrick did more interviews, I'd listen to that. I'm definitely interested in hearing people talk about the work. One of my favorite things about DVDs are when like the commentary tracks go into like nerdy minutia, and I get to hear David Fincher complain about 3-person coverage in the Seven commentary. Or you have a writer on talking about the screenplay for a commentary. Like, people talking about the work, talking about how they do it, that stuff's great. Reading news articles or reading op-eds by Martin Scorsese about how he isn't going to watch a movie, not interested. My leisure time is my own, thank you very much. Nobody asks me about how I'm spending my weekend or how I'm not watching a movie. I mean, then again, I'm also not an important person, but yeah, I don't know. Like, I've always liked criticism that has me walking away thinking differently about something. So, like when I'll talk with people about Whiplash, yeah, absolutely. What are you interested in, Lord Gloom? The Moth's Gift or mine? All right, memories fade, assistance departs, but the soul is refreshed. No, it's all good. That rant can go on forever. I also need to catch up on the day's work, so I'm going to queue everything up. But yeah, go ahead with your question. Yeah, so what I was going to say about Whiplash was that, like, actually, this came up today unexpectedly, but I am genuinely on the fence about whether or not Whiplash has a good ending. And I think a lot of it depends on whether or not you think someone like Fletcher is the sort of person you should want to make happy or want their approval of. And the thing that I like about it is that most people I know say it's a good ending or a happy ending. And I don't necessarily think it's that interesting for me to turn around and say, they kind of talk about, what about that sequence where you talk about the suicide of that player? It kind of seems to be setting, Neiman up as towards having a very unhappy life at the end of the, after the film is done. But the thing isn't the gotcha, right? Like the idea here isn't to make someone like a movie differently or less after it. What I like more is the fact that ending is so good that it actually sustains both interpretations, right? It's supported in the context of the movie. You can find support for and against, and what you do is you think about it, right? You have an experience, and then you can imagine having a talk with someone on, one side or the other about the film. And you don't even need to come to some sort of consensus on it. It's rather just that it is this nice, complicated movie in a certain way. Like, not complicated in the sense it's hard to understand, but like there's enough going on with the characters, their motivations, and what you see, that things that seem very straightforward actually have another layer to it. And it's not necessarily that it's pointing you to another direction or that, you can be deliberately contrarian with it, but rather it's you, there's enough space for you to have a different thought on it, and it actually doesn't quite let you off the hook. It's one where you could actually spend quite a bit of time trying to resolve that question and looking at all the different things inside of that story. So okay, so what do they mean? You try to think of these things as inputs and outputs. So is a form like an expected result out of using the item? So I think I may be missing out on exactly what you mean, expertise and forms, Lord Gloom. Could you give me a specific... could you give me a couple of specific things that you're looking at there? Because I've lost the plot. Oh, the book that I was looking at. Okay, yeah. Oh, I see. Right. Sorry. I keep paying attention to these things. Okay. So powers. These are the aspects of the book. Or actually, sorry, it's not just the book. It's what I'll do here is I'm actually going to go down to the Rowanarium because I think I can probably do the same thing here. So if I add preliminal meter and shaft. Okay. So notice here. So the challenges are part of the Rowanarium. So notice here that I've added the skill, preliminal meter. So the powers here are the aspects related to the various principles. They're called powers because not all of, like, Rose is not a principle, it's a power, or whatever they wind up calling it. I say power because it's written here. But Nock says principle, Rose specifically doesn't say principle. So sorry, you're talking about expertise and forms. So let's add in the shaft in this case, or let's add fet then. Okay, so again, what it is it's basically just giving you it's coming up with a slightly more it's coming up with a more ordered way of putting all of the different aspects that the cards have. So under expertise, I mean, again, you're just as capable of reading these as I can, but maybe for the benefit of people who might be watching on mobile. So under powers, fundamental categories of power recognized by scholars of the invisible arts. Find these in soul cards, skills, memories, items. Use them to succeed in studying and crafting challenges. Challenges are, of course, well, these are just, this kind of exists on, some version of this exists on just basically every crafting section. So expertise, abilities, skills, and personal resources. So essentially, the main thing to think about on this one would just be, these are the things that are sort of defining the type of card that you have, independent of the aspects it has. So the best example I can point to here would be for my fet. Fet is an element of the soul. So that is its form. That is the thing that it is, the entity that it is. Or sorry, form is separate. My bad. The expertise part is the element of the soul. So I am dealing with an element of the soul that has these powers. However, the powers are not limited to elements of the soul. They are also something that can be part of a skill, hence the presence of skill. And then you'll notice here the remainder are basically all of the other aspects of the preliminal meter that are related to the kind of thing that it is. So in this case, I committed it to ithistry. That's why it's in there. Committed here, and then the attunement, right? And then the form is actually a bit of a weird one. But in this case here, it's specifically something that you use to attach to a bed. Occupant, you will actually tend not to see this on a lot of cards. The only thing is that you use Elements of the Soul on the beds, and so it wanted something to be sure that it said, okay, this is a thing to make sure that you can use it with a bed. So it says challenges is the only special one there. The other three are filters and just organization. Exactly, yes. So I think if I go to a desk, I'm still going to have the challenges. So this just lets you know, right, if you want to do apprentice level thing, in this case, a crafting, you're going to need 5 of the aspect. If you want scholar, you need 10. And then it also specifies that you need the special item, and keeper goes up to 15. So this is just letting you know what you need to do to achieve these certain levels of challenge. Whereas the Rowanarium is special because you can also evolve via Skolakosophy with it. So if I wanted to, I've got a few examples of this. Let's look at Skolakosophy. So if I took, well, I couldn't here, but like if I had Horns and Ivories and it would accept this one, I could use the Horns and Ivories to level up my Shapt. It has to be 5 of the specific aspect that you're looking for. So I'll do the Wistful Air. Right. So in the case of strings and songs, so skill without effort is like tea without boiling water. No one wants to eat tea leaves. So because strings and songs is so highly leveled, I don't have the option of 5. I'm basically going to go straight to 10. So in this case, the Prentice level challenge is the Wistful Air. So that needs 5 of the Sky aspect. Cheerful Ditty is also an option, so that needs 5 Heart. The Scholar level challenge is 10 of the relevant aspect, and then they'll always require some broad category of like a secondary item. So some things need fluid, some things need flowers. In the case of the Ascendant Harmony, it needs an instrument. So because this is a workstation, right, we haven't seen this category before, but because this is an instrument, it actually is endowed with this instrument aspect, which is what allows the Ascendant Harmony to be created. You might ask the reasonable question is like, okay, so do I just have to use that at instruments? Technically, no. What you could do, if you went to the... So you take strings and songs. For this one, I'll add the core. So what I would need is something with the instrument aspect, and as it happens, there is an actual instrument in the game. That's right, yeah. So I need, as a minimum, I need the 10 of the relevant power. In addition, for any of the Scholar level recipes, I need some other thing. And again, the Ascendant Harmony and Thunderskin's Paean are pretty easy because they're instruments. And then at the Keeper level recipe, I actually like the description. Available only to the wise, the great, or the most fortunate of idiots. For the most challenging recipes, provide 15 degrees of the relevant aspect. Every Keeper level recipe also needs a very specific ingredient. The perfect ingredient may even mean that you need less aspect. So I will confess, so I was confused by what you were asking in terms of form and expertise, because I almost never look at this bottom part. But essentially that is kind of this is like the Court of Appeal if you can't figure out why you can't do a certain thing. So again, add strings and songs. I'm like, I'll add the core. Okay. Hey, why can't I do the Ascendant Harmony? Oh, I've only got 9 sky. All right. Well, let me add the Foss then. And so on and so forth. But I'll be honest with you. As long as you understood how the crafting works, just like in terms of the numbers, let's say with the recipes, you could have ignored that bottom part for most of the stuff that you want to do and get through the game. Okay, I think I said that I was going to level up Ragged Crossroads. Now, we don't have that much to do otherwise, so we just need 7 of, I believe it was Winter and Edge. Yep. I don't even remember where we were on... do Book of True Blood. So that's 1. Two. Three. Four. Five. I think that's it for Winter and Edge. Six. I gotta remember which one of these gives me Winter. I already used up the Ericapan, darn it. Yeah. Okay, that should cover us. But yeah, sorry, Lord Gloom. That is a bit of a weird one for me to answer, and I'm not entirely sure I gave the clearest response, but some of your responses at least indicated to me that you had an idea of how it worked. So if you have, yeah, if you have follow-ups, feel free to ask. But you actually touched on something I almost never use on my own, so I'm sure you detected the sort of hesitation in terms of discussing. Ah, yes, my Cater and Hero. Let's brew some of that right now. No. I'll brew 2 as a precaution, and then the other 2 go into the kitchen. Steam and scent both rise. It's ready. The Book of True Blood, Cassius the Tommen, reveals the deeds of the Unnumbered Legion, the secret army that protected Rome against the Shadowless Empire. The Legion's legate answered directly to the hour called the Tribune of Scars, and was promised immortality if he died in battle. In the final part, Cassius confesses to being a former legate. He recounts his terror of the Tribune and divulges the secret lore of the Golden General, the champion of the Shadowless Empire, the enemy of the Tribune, in hope that the Tribune will someday be undone. The Scar in the Sky. Nin wrote this and came to regret it. Each page of this book contains one word only, but as each page is turned, knowledge creeps in. The final page is crowded. Each reader of the book records the same word. Now it is my turn. Cleansing has left my skin burning, my teeth throbbing. The chorality rumbles beneath the membranous surfaces of the waking world. Nin's Cages, Bruges text, illuminated. The merciful measures of the witch Nin. This is only a partial version of the original, but it contains illustrations by Nin's pupil, Mabelie of Bruges, which supplement the original. Sorry, just bear with me one second here. The Book of the Extinguished Heart. In the days of the Shadowless Kings, Ennis Lazali was executed for prophesying the division of the sun. If any of his captors grew long, they probably feel rather abashed now. Lazali indicates that the sun will be divided in the Mallory by the Forge of Days, armed with love in her heart. Love will not be the cause of the sun's death, but rather envy. Envy will not be the cause of the sun's death, but rather thirst. Thirst shall not be the cause of his death, but curiosity. Curiosity shall not be his end. Rather, it will be love. Observations on the Peacock Door. Nangela of Lagash discusses the Peacock Door, the highest door available to mortals in the Mansis, a rent, an imperfection, an abrasion. Notably, the book is written in Vac, which, by some accounts, is another aspect of the Peacock Door itself. Nangala addresses this by apologizing courteously to the door and the language at the end of every section. The Peacock Door did not exist, Nangala says, in the days when the gods from stone entered the Mansis. They used the Fang Key to open the Savage Door, a door not usually available to mortals. Speech, as the initiates of Kion would have it, is a wound. I fear that through that wound the blood of the Mansis flows even now, and that one day speech will be an end to dream. I fear that, but I fear the alternative far more. So this kind of touches on this idea of, the silent cult is silent for a very good reason by their reasoning. The Sky and the Scar. Gnomic exhortations that might be described as emergency procedures for the return of the traveling kinds of the Carapace Cross. This book houses a Numen, a truth so powerful it can perhaps believe itself. Each page of this book, except the last, bears a single sign, clear and irrefutable as a gem. The final page is empty. The traveling kinds of the Carapace Cross might never return. Oblations in Iron, a monster hunting initiate of the hour named the Colonel, who identifies herself as Little Sophia, records the exhibits she has rendered to the Worm Museum in the Mansus. Little Sophia has never visited the Worm Museum, or even the Mansus in person, and evidently has no desire to do so. She mixes ink, which incorporates the remains of her prey, writes her records in that ink, then burns them before the Colonel's altar. It is essential, however, to permit no drop of the ink thereby obtained to enter any portal of the body, even a break in the barrier of the skin. Should any fragment of the worm remain viable, it might enter thereby, and the hunt's ultimate conclusion be melancholy indeed. So there's the inks of containment we were looking for, and that got me a hindsight. So let me just add that to the... Oh, shucks. Okay, we're going to give that an overflow for now. I spent so much time reorganizing the library that I really don't want to put the time into messing with this at the end. Okay, so... At last I approach mastery, improve the skill to level 8. Now, this is going to feel like a little bit of a cheat, I guess. But I actually don't have that much else to do over the course of the day. I mean, I could order some stuff from Cater and Hero, but I think at this point we're just going to wait and see whether or not the Affair of the Other Horizon delivers the goods. I think I was a little too late. Yeah. So what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to push through the rest of autumn. I know it's not the most exciting thing to do. Actually, I guess one thing I can do here is just... I can make a little bit of money in between. But what I'm really trying to do here is just get to winter so that I can see whether or not this strategy for getting through the... I want to see if the strategy for getting through the events faster works. Okay, we're going to leave that be. We'll have one more day of this afterwards. Two foggy days. So this is the sort of thing that I was looking to avoid. What I may do is I may do the descriptions of the rooms in between seasons, just so I can sort of take a look at all of the different items. I might still do it at sort of 6 speed. But the reason here why I'm sort of mainlining the season is right now I don't know if this is a viable way to get through the events rather quickly. I mean, it's still going to be sort of 2 seasons for each incident. I'm going to see if there's a way that I can narrow that down, but I think that's going to be just the cost of doing business. Okay. Let's also see, does this... Cool. Current affairs. What's happening in the world beyond Brandkrug? What visitors will the season bring? So I'm not going to prepare a salon yet, just because I want to see specifically how this turns out. Cool. All right, so that was the affair of the Other Horizon. Sailors have a term for the compass whirl phenomenon, which occurs before sightings of the city Ys. They say a compass has caught the giddy horizons. There is something of a giddy epidemic in the North Sea this year. Visitors with an interest in Rose Mysteries will want to talk about this. Now, we're probably going to invite all three back at the end of the event. A story has no beginning or end. Arbitrarily, one chooses that moment of experience from which to look back or from which to look ahead. So this is the end of the affair. Now, what I want to do here is see specifically how the game works with this transition, because there was a time when I tried sort of doing the Inkling, and I wanted to see, okay, so is there, like, can I make it so that I have no gap in between the events? But it does occur to me I don't have any control of which one gets picked up. So I don't know if there's any value in bringing more than one event in. Okay, a consultation. Yeah, because here it goes straight back to a consultation. Now, one thing I could do is just have two events on the screen and then just deal with both quickly, and then I just have like a bit of a queue set up for each month, each season. I can see maybe a little bit of logic behind that. But I mean, in practice, I don't get an infinite supply of Inklings, right? I need two of them, and then I need to use an Encastum, so it's not like that's an easy one for me to give up. Okay, nothing particular is afoot. Any visitors this season will likely just want a general consultation. So, I'm happy to make Corso happy. We'll give him a Grail text this time. I'll confess, these seem rather intense. I thought we had, like, simple Grail. My visitor has questions about blood or birth, or both. My collection has answers. So, while we do that... So we finished... the Mystique, so the compass should be easy to find. It's a big compass on the screen. There it is. The Other Horizon, an emissary of Ys really abroad in the bounds? So Adim and Dagmar are the ones I can invite for that. Looks like I have to write one for... Okay. So I figure we can resolve this first, and then we can... host the salon. We can, however, start with inviting Dr. Adim right away. I always like when winter comes. The music's really very beautiful. Now I just need to post it. So what the game is pointing me to right now, so Adim, help Adim deport the Yeezan, or help Dagmar deal with the Yeezan. Interesting. How visceral. Okay. So. This Yeezan emissary has This Yeezan emissary has overstayed his welcome, and he was never very welcome. I have been asked to explain that to him, but I lack the terms. I would find Door and Wall 10 helpful, or see stories. Or help Dagmar deal with the Yeezan. Alright, doing a favor for a bureau friend, seeing off the interloper. Boo, not boo, shan't be silly about it. How's a collection of Door and Wall or sea stories? Or, you know, if you had something on Yeez, I suppose I ought to read it. Giving Dagmar something intriguing on Yeez may shake her resolve. Well then, I think I will content myself with the simple Door and Wall that Adim is asking for. I think Temptations on Architecture might... Oh, yep. That's the one. Alright, but I gotta... Return the next day. Okay, so there's a couple things I'm going to want to do. So we've got Daymare hanging out with us right now. I'm actually going to try something here. This is way too early for me to... Yeah, that's 3 minutes. So I'm curious if I can keep recycling Daymare or not. I would like to have her be part of the salon, but... in fact, I may have chosen the worst possible time to do this, but we'll see. But I do have my plans for the next season or two. So let me just take a quick second to update my to-do list. Okay, so number 1, salon. Okay, so people who I'm going to invite to the next salon. So we had Douglas. So Douglas has interactions with Aaron. Douglas also has interactions with Schaller. We have Daymare, who is already here, and on top of that, she also has interactions with Coquille. So Douglas wants Lantern. Aaron, I believe, wants Moon. Schaller is Heart. Daymare is Knock. Coquille is Grail. So I'm going to take a minute to verify that. Okay, Coquille, Grail, Stanislav, Heart, Douglas, Lantern, Peel, Moon, Daymare, Knock. All right. So as a last little bit for the day, I don't think I have that much. So Knock is always going to be a conundrum, but I actually don't think I have that much Lantern stuff hanging around anymore. We can probably consolidate a few of the dishes. Maybe move the mushroom meringue up here. Rosehip sponge cake. So I'll leave the King's Luck pie to the very end. There may not be enough room in this spot. Leek soup. I feel like I probably have room here. I know there's space here, but I want to see if I can get away with putting the King's Luck pie there. Okay, so if I put... Okay, so yeah, if this is the only Lantern food... that's obviously not the only Lantern food. And turns out I don't have space for it. Cool. So the Honey Haunted Amber Pie. That's going to be one... I'm not going to give that one up for a while. Yeah, I don't think I even have the Golden Marrow. Which is incident... Oh, the Knot Cake. Okay. That one I might be willing to give up. I'm trying to get to a point where all of my food is in one part of the house. Alright, I think I'm going to have to live with those exceptions for now. So maybe the Knot Cake for... Actually, you know what? Let's make a judgment. Knot Cake for Douglas. So Aaron wants Moon, so I think probably the soup ought to do the trick. Actually, any of these ought to do the trick, but leek soup. A milder taste than onion soup, but no less warming. That's a good winter. So that's a first course. So we need a side and a main with heart, knock, or grail. Well, okay, the grail one's an easy one. We've got fudge, so 2 puddings. So a main and a side with heart and knock. And then if I look at my... If I can avoid the game chips, that would be great. I can never remember... Well, it's game pie then. Got a sea pie. I'm thinking there's probably a knock dish which I'm not aware of. Now here's the fun challenge. I believe I've roasted all my beef and my... So if I want the game chip, game chips, which is like my only option, I'm either gonna have to buy yeah, I'm gonna have to buy a buy beef, or I mean, I could do a Walls of Ys, which would be the third. Well, actually, okay, you know what? That does have a slight logic to it in the sense that I can switch out the fudge. You know what? This is, yeah. We will put the Walls of Ys then. So the fudge goes back to the pantry. So Coquille will be satisfied with the beef. So we've got the lantern, we've got the moon, we've got the grail, and we've got the knock. So now we need a side with heart. And I think actually good old-fashioned roast potatoes ought to do the trick for that. But let me just see. Part of this is just working down what I already have. Onion rings apparently also get... just about everything has got heart, so... Okay, so the only side dish that I have that doesn't have heart is almonds. So egg croquettes, pickled mackerel, pickled pilchards. You know, we already had the egg croquettes, and they were also... they're actually also... in a spot that was hard for me to remember to check. So I'm going to change the order around a little bit. All right, so last thing I need to do is sort out the drinks. So this ought to do the trick. This gives us both Lantern and Nox, so both of those should do for Daymare and Douglas. Water will do for Peel. And we should have some drinking cocoa left over for... Which actually brings me to water. So I need another one of those because of Schaller. Okay. I'll confess, it's an unusual but kind of fun problem to try and work out a Salon by drawing down my existing resources. I definitely need to get more... I definitely need to get more sort of ingredients. Probably some beef is a must at this point. All right, let me just double check. So this is for Daymare. Oop. I think I have one too many water. There we go. Okay, Aaron Peel, Daymare, Douglas, Coquille, Schaller. And for invitations, we have Schaller, Peel, no Douglas. Okay, I don't have Coquille either, so I'll work that out. Sorry about the wait here. I was actually thinking I would be wrapping up, but I want to get I do want to get the Salon taken care of before I call it a night. Otherwise, I'm going to forget. So I'm going to try and run out the night. I do kind of want to see what happens if I try to put a guest to bed a second time. I might actually just be able to run it down. I don't quite know what the timer looks like for her. My visitor grows impatient. Okay, no, we've got 5 minutes, so we're fine. So here's what I'll do, because we're so close to getting the Salon in. Let's send the invitations off. Okay, so we won't do the Salon today. That's just so I can be ready for Wednesday's stream. But we should be able to see what happened with the further story. The prowling Lost Horizon. The prowling emissary of Ys was returned to his home beyond the wave. Help Aladim deport the Yzin. This Yzin emissary has overstayed his welcome. He was never very welcome. And he was never very welcome. I have been asked to explain that to him, but I lack the terms. I would find Doran Wall helpful, or sea stories. I have escorted their emissary out of the bounds. The encounter was a useful reminder. Ys is beguiling. Ys is not malicious, but Ys is never to be trusted. Thank you, librarian. And Dr. Ibn Aladim has got the agenda piece. A visitor has been affected by recent events and may now be more inclined to join the Lighthouse Institute. And Fear Ys, a visitor has been affected by recent events and may now be more inclined to join the Lighthouse Institute. We got another Inkling for our trouble, as well as the Bronze Spintria, so we'll just load these all up. For this one, I think we'll just satisfy Dr. Adim's curiosity. We don't have a spot at the Salon. I'm curious, this will be the last chance that I have to do a level 4 scale book. Peace be with you. I ask entry to the house. My visitor has questions about matters generally left buried. The answers can be found in my collection. Okay. So all in all, I'd say that's a tidy little finish to the day's work. So I'm just going to get back my notes. So I don't need to do Ibn Aladim's solution anymore. Salon, level skills. And yeah, I mean, so this was a little bit of an experiment, but I think this is a model for how I can get a bit more progress in the I think this is an indicator in terms of how I can make some progress with the Lighthouse Institute. So just to be clear here, technically we're short a treasurer. Fraser Strathcoyne does start inspired though, so in a pinch I might be able to make it work with him. For Secretary Salvant, I can't recall if Agdistis or Fekri have been inspired, but I know Shalar is. It'd be interesting if Shalar would be Secretary Salvant with Strathcoyne as the treasurer, because he fears the Carapace Cross. We did help, excuse me, Arthur Thomas Moore, so he's a potential candidate for Secretary Vigilant. We also have Lalakaima, Douglas Moore, and Azita Bukhara. For the Secretary Enigmatic, we have Aaron Peel, Corso Reverte, Yvette Southey, and Zachary Wakefield, all, except maybe Corso, attractive candidates in their own right. I don't know if I've settled on one yet, but that's one we do at least have one candidate who is inspired. The Secretary Nunciant, I believe we now have 2 potential candidates, now that Ibn Aladim is a potential Secretary Nunciant as well. And then the Secretary Persistent, we need either Mrs. E or Morgan. So in the strictest sense, I think we need 2 more? May just be 1 more now that I think of it. But it'd probably be better for me to prepare for 2. And the thing is, I don't know what event comes up. So But yeah, so I think at bare minimum, what we can do is yeah, I need to figure out whether or not I want to use these Inklings, but we can finish off this season. We'll have the Salon, we'll get the lessons stemming from that, so that'll take us a little bit of time to digest. And then we will have, I believe at that point, we will draw a new event. We won't necessarily know who the potential inspiration is until we actually resolve it. But moving forward, basically every 2 seasons, the plan's going to be to just bring in everybody who could potentially interact with that event. And then when the next season comes, it resolves it. We figure out, who we want to resolve things with, and move on from there. So in order to, one last thing I'll say is, in order to kind of try and keep the drudgery, try and make it so it's not 3 hours of me sort of fast forwarding the game and occasionally pausing, the other thing that I might do in between is sort of play even at a higher speed, but basically I'll investigate all of the different objects in the house while we're not leveling up skills and such. And then that will hopefully give us a little bit more of the lore to play around with. I'm not too unhappy with how it's been turning out. Obviously, I've been able to draw down on a bunch of my food. But we have a handful up here. Actually, we should be able to move some of the other goodies. So we can take the King's Luck pie out of the cold. I wonder if I've got space for fried mushrooms on toast. Nope. What I might do though is take the the pilchards on toast. So that way, so for areas that I'll check for food, we've got here mushrooms. Okay, so we still have a couple stragglers over here, but it should be basically here, here, and here. And the consequence of this is we're going to have more rooms to host salons in. I've been going for sort of the extra event ones just because they, it's a chance for us to catch up with what all the characters are doing. But if I want, I can sort of do smaller salons in the, in the Gullscry Logia and such. But of course, all of that's going to be handled in a future episode. I'll end up going later than I was expecting. Not that that's a bad thing. It's February the 10th. So thank you everybody for hanging out. I particularly appreciate everybody's patience as I was talking about sort of unrelated topics, although it's always fun to interact with you and hear your thoughts on those, or at the very least just to hear you patiently listen. We've got a few people online tonight, and in this case I see Prosciutto Fist is playing Octopath Traveler. So I'm going to send you on to her, especially because I actually haven't seen her online in a few days. So I actually haven't seen Octopath Traveler before, but the friend I was talking about who really is into Civ talked about really liking the visual style of Octopath Traveler. So I did want to... I wanted to kind of check it out for myself as well. Prosciutto Fist is a very friendly streamer, much better at variety than I am. I originally found her through Book of Hours, but I don't know how often she actually wants to play it. But in any case, always feels nice to be able to host someone. So I'm going to leave you in her capable hands. Zorog is also very familiar with Pro's broadcasts. I think between the two of us, we can conduct a campaign of psychological warfare to make her play it again. But I will confess, I am actually rather looking forward to the next week of Book of Hours stream. So again, we're going to try and knock down some character lore. We're going to try and get some inspirations for the Lighthouse Institute. The only thing I'll mention is that the Wednesday after next Wednesday, so a week from, take Wednesday, add a week, I will be at the local game dev meetup. That's the only planned absence. But we should have some decent progress. So anyways, I'm running out on my timer. Have a good night. I will see you all on Wednesday. Take care. Have a good one, Revived.